Boy finds horse in the middle of the desert, but when he discovers who it belonged to, his life changes. Billy Johnson Smith held the dented aluminum cup tightly as he watched the panting beige horse in front of him. The animal trembled from thirst and exhaustion, its legs quivering as if they might give way at any moment. The 11-year-old boy, his curly hair stuck to his sweaty face, didn't hesitate to offer the water he'd fetched from the nearest well, even though he knew it might be the last drop available for his own family. The scorching sun of the Arizona desert beat down mercilessly on the cracked earth, creating heat waves that distorted the barren landscape around him. Billy was barefoot, his feet already calloused from daily walks in search of water, wearing nothing but a faded pair of shorts that had once belonged to two older brothers. The withered tree beside him, with its twisted branches and not a single leaf, looked like a skeleton abandoned in the middle of nowhere. The horse drank the water desperately, and Billy noticed something that made him squint against the sun's glare. There was a mark on the animal's flank, but it wasn't an ordinary brand. It was something delicate, almost artistic, engraved with a precision Billy had never seen on the animals in the area. His small, rough hands stroked the horse's neck, feeling the tense muscles beneath its sweaty coat. "Easy, boy," Billy whispered, using the same gentle tone his mother used to calm the neighborhood babies. "You're not going to be left here alone." The sound of his own voice echoing in the desert silence reminded him where he was and why he was there. His mother, Margaret, had sent him to look for any water source that hadn't completely dried up yet. That year's drought was the worst the family had ever faced, and the water reserves they managed to store at home barely lasted 2 days. Billy looked around, trying to figure out how this horse had ended up here in the middle of nowhere, far from any ranch or road. The animal seemed well cared for. Its coat, despite the exhaustion, had a shine that spoke of good feeding and regular grooming. That was strange, very strange for a place where most animals struggled to survive just as much as the people. "Where'd you come from, huh?" he asked softly, running his hand through the horse's tangled mane. The horse lifted its head and looked straight into the boy's eyes, as if it understood the question. There was an intelligence in that gaze that sent a shiver down Billy's spine. It wasn't the look of an ordinary animal. It was something different, something that seemed to carry stories and secrets. Billy knew he needed to get home. His mother would worry if he took too long, and there were still chores to finish before sunset. But something kept him from leaving that horse behind, alone and vulnerable. Maybe it was the same compassion his mother always showed for those in need, or maybe it was just a child's intuition telling him this encounter would change everything. He looked at the empty cup in his hands and made a decision, one he wasn't sure was wise or completely reckless. He tied an old rope he carried at his waist around the horse's neck, fashioning a makeshift lead. "Come with me," he said firmly. "Mama'll know what to do." The path back home was long and winding, snaking between loose rocks and small dry shrubs, the only signs of vegetation in the desolate landscape. Billy walked slowly, letting the horse set its own pace, stopping whenever the animal needed to rest. The sun was beginning to dip westward, painting the sky in orange hues that signaled the end of another hard day in the desert. As they walked, Billy couldn't stop thinking about the mark he'd seen on the horse. His childish mind tried to come up with stories to explain how such a well-cared-for animal had ended up lost in the middle of the desert. Maybe it had run away from some distant ranch, or perhaps it belonged to someone important who had no idea. The animal was missing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. The Smith family home appeared on the horizon like a small dark speck against the vast golden expanse of the desert. It was a simple adobe brick house with a red-tiled roof that had clearly seen better days. A rickety wooden fence marked the boundary of the yard, where a few chickens pecked at the ground, searching for anything edible. Margaret Smith sat on the porch, mending one of her husband's shirts, when she spotted the silhouette of her youngest son approaching. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Blame it on exhaustion and constant worry. But as the figure grew clearer, she was certain Billy wasn't alone. "My heavens," she murmured, letting the needle and fabric drop into her lap. Margaret was a 42-year-old woman, who looked like she'd lived twice as long. Her face, weathered by worry and the relentless sun, still held traces of the beauty that had bloomed in her youth. Her brown hair, always tied in a simple bun, was just beginning to show the first streaks of grey, silent witnesses to the daily struggles she faced to keep the family together. She stood quickly, smoothing the wrinkles from her faded cotton skirt, and walked toward the wooden gate that creaked every time it opened. Her eyes couldn't believe what they saw. Her 11-year-old son, barefoot and sweaty, leading a horse that clearly didn't belong to their family or any neighbor she knew. "Billy Johnson," she called, using his full name as she always did. When she was worried or surprised, "What in the world is this?" The boy quickened his pace at the sound of his mother's voice, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. He knew he'd have a lot to explain, but he also felt he'd done the right thing by bringing the animal home. "Mom, I found him in the desert," Billy began, still catching his breath from the walk. He was all alone, real thirsty, almost collapsing. I couldn't just leave him there. Margaret studied the horse with an experienced eye. She'd grown up in the desert and had known animals since she was little. She could tell right away this wasn't just any horse, even dirty and sweaty. Its coat had a quality that spoke of special care. Its posture, tired as it was, revealed good breeding, and there was something in the way it carried itself that suggested training and discipline. "Son, this horse isn't ours," she said, cautiously stepping closer. "And from what I can see, it doesn't belong to anyone around here either." "No, Mum," Billy replied, stroking the horse's neck. "But he was alone. He'd have been worse off if I left him there." Margaret sighed deeply. She knew her son's kind heart well, the same compassion he'd inherited from her, the kind that often landed them in tricky situations. But she couldn't deny she felt sorry for the animal too, clearly lost and in need. "All right," she finally said. "We'll give him water and some food, but tomorrow we've got to find out who he belongs to and return him." Billy's face lit up with a grin that showed a few teeth still in the process of growing in. He knew his mother, for all the practicality life had taught her, had a heart that couldn't ignore suffering, whether it came from people or animals. "Thank you, Mum," he said, hugging his mother's legs tightly. Margaret gently stroked her son's curly hair, feeling the warmth still radiating from his head after his walk under the sun. At that moment, as she watched Billy tend to the horse with a dedication that touched her heart, she had no idea that this seemingly simple decision would set off a chain of events that would completely transform their lives. The Smith family's backyard gained a new resident that night. Billy improvised a shelter for the horse, using some old planks and a tarp his mother kept for rainy days. It wasn't much, but it offered some protection against the night wind that swept through the desert, bringing an unexpected chill to those who endured the scorching heat during the day. The horse drank nearly all the water the family had managed to save for the week, but Margaret couldn't bring herself to ration it. She saw in the animal's grateful gaze a need that went beyond physical thirst, as if it understood it had found a safe refuge after a long and dangerous journey. Billy refused to come in for dinner until he was sure the horse was comfortable. He sat on the ground beside the animal, offering small handfuls of dry grass he had gathered around the house. It wasn't much, but it was all they had to give. "Mom," Billy said, finally coming inside when it was already dark, "did you see the mark he has?" Margaret was preparing the family's dinner, beans with flour and a small piece of jerky she had managed to buy in town. It wasn't a lavish meal, but it was enough to satisfy everyone's hunger. She stopped stirring the pot and looked at her son. "What mark?" "On his flank, there's a strange mark. It's not like the ones Mr. Anthony puts on his cattle," Billy explained, gesturing with his small hands. "It looks like a pretty design." Margaret set the wooden spoon aside and followed her son outside. With the help of an oil lamp, she carefully examined the animal. When she saw the mark, a chill ran through her stomach that had nothing to do with the night wind. The mark was sophisticated, crafted with artistic precision that must have cost a fortune. It was two elegantly intertwined letters surrounded by a small crown. Margaret had never seen anything like it in the area, but her motherly intuition and experience told her that this mark belonged to someone very important and very wealthy. "Billy," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, "I think this horse belongs to someone very important. Tomorrow morning? We'll have to ask around, if anyone knows anything about it. The boy nodded, but Margaret noticed a shadow of sadness cross his eyes. It was only natural. He had already grown attached to the animal, and she knew how hard it was for a child to let go of something they had begun to love. That night, Billy barely slept. He lay in the bed he shared with his two older brothers, Tommy and Mike, listening to the sounds of the desert and thinking about the horse. Every now and then he got up to peek at it through the small bedroom window, making sure the animal was all right. Tommy, 15, and Mike, 13, had reacted, with a mix of curiosity and concern when they heard what their younger brother had done. They knew the family's financial situation well and understood that keeping a horse, even temporarily, meant sharing resources that were already scarce. "Billy's too soft-hearted," Tommy murmured to Mike, thinking their little brother was asleep, always bringing animals home. "But this time is different," Mike whispered back. "That horse isn't from around here. Someone important must be looking for it." Billy heard everything, pretending to sleep, but his thoughts were far away. He wondered who the horse's owner might be, how it had gotten lost, whether other people were looking for it. A part of his childish imagination fantasized that maybe no one would come to claim it, that the horse could stay with them forever. But even as a child, Billy understood enough about life to know that good things rarely stayed with people like his family. The boy's father, Frank Smith, came home late at night after a full day of work on the property of Colonel William Parker, the richest and most powerful man in the region. Frank was a 45-year-old man, lean but strong, marked by years of hard labor under the sun. His calloused hands and weathered face told the story of a life dedicated to manual work. When he heard about the horse, his first reaction was worry. He knew the unwritten rules of the desert well. Messing with someone else's property, even with good intentions, could bring serious trouble for a poor family like theirs. "Margaret," he said to his wife, keeping his voice low so as not to wake the children. "That horse has to leave here tomorrow. If it belongs to some important rancher and they find out it's here, they might think we stole it." "I know, Frank," she replied, sharing her husband's concerns. "I already told Billy we'd look for the owner tomorrow. But what were we supposed to do? Let the poor thing die of thirst in the desert?" Frank sighed, running a hand through his thinning, graying hair. He knew his wife's kindness well, the same kindness he'd fallen for when he met her as a young man. But he also knew that in the world they lived in, kindness wasn't always seen in a good light, especially when it came from poor folks. "Tomorrow I'll ask Colonel Parker if he knows anything," he decided. "If someone lost a horse around here, he'll know." Margaret nodded but felt a tightness in her chest. Colonel William Parker was known for his strictness and difficult temper. If the horse was his or belonged to someone he knew, things could get complicated for the family. In the desert, a rich man's word carried far more weight than a poor family's, and any misunderstanding could cost Frank his job. The next morning, Billy woke before sunrise. He ran to the yard to check on the horse and was relieved to find it standing, seemingly recovered from the exhaustion of the day before. The animal greeted him with a soft whinny, stretching its neck toward the boy as if recognizing him as its savior. "Good morning, boy," Billy said, using the same affectionate word he used for all animals. "Did you sleep well?" He gave the horse more water and the last of the dry grass he'd managed to gather. As the animal ate, Billy noticed more details he hadn't seen the day before. The horse's hooves, though dirty, showed signs of regular care. The horseshoes were well made and still relatively new. Everything suggested the animal had received regular veterinary care, something rare in those parts. Margaret appeared at the door, already dressed and ready for another day of work. She watched her son with the horse and felt a mix of pride and worry. Pride for the compassion Billy showed, worry for what this situation might bring upon the family. "Billy, come have breakfast," she called. "Your father already left for work and said he'd ask about the horse." Breakfast was simple, weak, coffee sweetened with brown sugar, and tapioca made from the flour Margaret had gotten on her last trip to town. For a family used to hardship, it was enough to start the day, but Billy could barely eat, too worried about what would happen to the horse. Tommy and Mike watched their younger brother with a mix of admiration and concern. They knew Billy's sensitive nature well, his tendency to grow attached to animals quickly, and they understood how hard the separation would be for him. "Billy," Tommy said, trying to sound casual, "you know the horse can't stay here forever, right?" The boy nodded sadly, stirring his porridge without any appetite. "I know," he murmured. "But he was all alone, Tommy. It would have only gotten worse." Mike, who despite being just 2 years older than Billy, had a maturity beyond his years, moved closer to his brother. "You did the right thing," he said sincerely. "Mum always taught us to help those in need. But now we have to do what's right again, return him to his owner." Margaret overheard her son's conversation and felt her heart tighten. She knew Mike was right, that returning the horse was the only sensible option, but she also understood the pain Billy was feeling. It was the same ache she felt whenever she had to make tough decisions to protect the family. The sun was high when Frank returned from work earlier than usual. His serious expression told Margaret immediately that there was news, and not necessarily good news. "Well?" she asked, stepping closer to her husband. "I spoke with Colonel Parker," Frank replied, removing his straw hat and wiping his sweaty forehead. "He said he doesn't recognize the horse but wants to see it in person." A chill ran down Margaret's spine. She knew Colonel Parker's reputation, knew he wasn't a man to waste time on matters that didn't interest him. If he had asked to see the horse himself, it meant something important was at stake. "When does he want to come?" she asked, already dreading the answer. "This afternoon," Frank answered. "He said he'd stop by after lunch." Billy, who had gone out to tend to the horse, came running back when he heard his parents talking in serious tones. "Dad, did you find out who owns the horse?" he asked, his voice a mix of hope and fear. Frank looked at his youngest son, seeing the anxiety written on his young face. He knew this would be hard for Billy, but he also knew there was no other way. "Not yet, son," he replied gently. "But Colonel Parker is coming to see the horse. He might know something." The rest of the morning dragged on endlessly for the Smith family. Margaret cleaned the house twice, worried about making a good impression on their important visitor. Frank checked repeatedly to make sure everything was in order in the yard. Tommy and Mike helped their mother with chores, sensing the tension that had settled over the house. Billy spent the whole time with the horse, as if he instinctively knew these might be their last hours together. He brushed the animal with an old brush he found in the shed, cleaned its hooves carefully, and gave it the best grass he could find. The horse seemed to understand the boy's devotion, staying calm and cooperative through every touch. At 2 in the afternoon, a white pickup truck kicked up a cloud of dust on the dirt road leading to the Smith family's home. Billy recognized the vehicle immediately. It belonged to Colonel William Parker, the man who employed his father and practically controlled the entire region's economy. Colonel Parker was a man in his 60s, with neatly combed gray hair and a mustache trimmed with military precision. He wore a crisp white dress shirt, beige linen pants, and leather boots that clearly cost more than Frank's salary for several months. His upright posture and piercing gaze revealed a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. Frank rushed to open the gate, tipping his hat in respect. Margaret smoothed her skirt nervously and called her children to present themselves properly to the distinguished visitor. "Good afternoon, Colonel," greeted Frank with the deference he had learned to show his employers over the years. "Good afternoon, Frank," replied the Colonel, stepping down from the pickup truck and carefully observing the humble property. "Where's that horse you mentioned?" Billy stepped forward, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. He wanted to show how well he had cared for the animal, but also feared what the Colonel might decide to do. "He's right here, sir," he said, leading the group to the makeshift shelter where the horse rested. Colonel Parker stopped abruptly when he saw the animal. His usually impassive face showed genuine surprise. He approached the horse slowly, examining it with the experienced eyes of someone who knew quality animals well. "My God," he murmured almost to himself, "it can't be." The Smith family watched in silence, trying to decipher the Colonel's reaction. Billy felt his heart pounding in his chest, sensing something important was happening. The Colonel walked around the horse, inspecting every detail. When he reached the hip where the brand was, he paused for a long moment, as if processing crucial information. "Boy," he said, addressing Billy for the first time. "Where exactly did you find this horse?" Billy swallowed hard before answering, intimidated by the colonel's imposing presence. "Out in the desert, sir," he replied in a shaky voice. "Near Old Jack's dry well. He was alone, real thirsty." The colonel nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off the animal. "And you brought him here all by yourself?" "Yes, sir," Billy confirmed. "Couldn't just leave him there. He was nearly collapsing from weakness." Mo. For the first time since his arrival, the colonel looked directly at Billy. There was something in his gaze the boy couldn't interpret, a mix of surprise and something that almost seemed like respect. "You did good, boy," he said finally. "This horse is very valuable. If he'd stayed out in the desert any longer, something irreversible might have happened." Frank and Margaret exchanged worried glances. If the horse was truly valuable, as the colonel had just confirmed, it meant their troubles might only be beginning. "Colonel," Frank said cautiously, "do you know who this horse belongs to?" The colonel remained silent for a long moment, as if making an important decision. Finally, he turned to face the family. "I do," he replied, "and this is going to complicate things. A lot." The silence that followed was deafening. Billy felt as if the world had stopped around him, as if everything depended on the colonel's next words. "This horse," the colonel continued, pointing to the brand on the animal's hip, "belongs to Senator Richard Thompson." Margaret brought a hand to her chest, her heart racing. Even as a simple countrywoman, she knew that name. Senator Richard Thompson was one of the most powerful men in the state, owner of lands stretching across several counties, a man whose influence reached all the way to the capital. "The senator?" Frank repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Exactly," the colonel confirmed. "And this isn't just any horse. This is Thunder, one of the senator's personal favorites. He must have been searching for this horse for days." Billy's legs nearly gave out. He had saved the prized horse of one of the most powerful men in the country. He didn't know if this was a blessing or a curse, but he was certain his life would never be the same. "Colonel," Margaret said, gathering her courage, "what happens now?" The colonel studied the family for a moment, noting the fear on every face. He knew that reality well, understood how simple folks reacted when they got tangled up, even unintentionally, with the powerful. "Now," he said, his voice heavy with a seriousness that made everyone shiver, "I need to call the senator and tell him we found Thunder." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. Colonel Parker pulled out a modern cell phone from his pocket, a stark contrast to the simple surroundings. The Smith family watched in complete silence as he dialed a number he clearly knew by heart. "Senator, it's William Parker speaking," he said, stepping a few paces away from the family. "I have news about Thunder." Billy couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but he could tell from the colonel's body language that it was serious. The man gestured as he spoke, occasionally glancing toward the horse and the family. Margaret moved closer to Frank and whispered, "What's going to happen to us?" "I don't know," her husband replied softly. "But let's pray the senator understands." We acted in good faith. Tommy and Mike positioned themselves near Billy, instinctively shielding their younger brother. They knew that whatever happened, Billy would be the most affected by the whole situation. The colonel ended the call and returned to the family. His expression was stern but not hostile. "The senator wants to speak in person with whoever found Thunder," he announced. "He's coming here today." "Today?" Margaret repeated, a mix of panic and disbelief in her voice. "That's right," the colonel confirmed. "He should arrive around 5 o'clock. He was at a ranch about 2 hours from here, handling other business." Frank took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when extremely nervous. "Colonel, with all due respect," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "we didn't do anything wrong. The boy just wanted to help the animal." "I know that, Frank," the colonel replied, his tone softening. "And that's what I'll explain to the senator. You acted with honesty and compassion. That counts for a lot." Billy, who had stayed quiet the whole time, finally found the courage to speak. "Colonel, can I keep Thunder until the senator gets here, just to take care of him?" The colonel looked at the boy, noticing the genuine concern in his eyes. "You can, son," he answered. "In fact, I think Thunder's taken a liking to your care." After the colonel left, promising to return with the senator, the Smith home became a whirlwind of nervous activity. Margaret started cleaning everything again, as if scrubbing harder could somehow improve their situation. "Mum, the house is already clean," Tommy said, trying to calm her. "You don't understand, Tommy," she replied, sweeping the floor with more force than necessary. "A senator is coming to our house." A senator. Billy spent the rest of the afternoon glued to the horse, who he now knew was named Thunder. The name seemed to fit the animal, who still carried a quiet energy even after his ordeal in the desert. "Thunder," Billy murmured, testing the name. "It's nice, isn't it?" The horse seemed to recognize his real name, lifting his head and looking straight at the boy. There was a connection there, something beyond simple gratitude, something even Billy couldn't fully explain. Mike walked over to his younger brother and sat beside him on the ground. "Billy, you can't get too attached to that horse," he said gently. "You know he'll have to leave, right?" "I know," Billy replied, not taking his eyes off the animal. "But he likes me, Mike. You can see it in his eyes." "Maybe he does," Mike agreed. "But he has an owner, and that owner is a very important person. You understand that, don't you?" Billy nodded sadly. Even as a child, he understood the unwritten rules of the world he lived in. People like his family didn't keep valuable things that belonged to powerful people. That's just how things worked, and there was nothing he could do to change it. At exactly 5 o'clock, the sound of approaching engines made the whole family rush to the window. 2 black pickups, shiny and obviously expensive, stopped in front of the gate. The second vehicle clearly carried security, men in dark suits and sunglasses who looked like characters from a movie. From the first vehicle stepped out a tall, elegant man wearing a light blue dress shirt and perfectly pressed dark slacks. Even the heat of the desert didn't seem to affect his impeccable appearance. His grey hair was neatly combed, and there was an air of authority in every move he made. "That's him," Margaret whispered to her husband. "It's the senator." Colonel Parker stepped out of the same vehicle and walked alongside the senator toward the gate. Frank rushed to open it, removing his hat and trying to steady his trembling hands. "Good afternoon, Senator," he greeted in the most respectful voice he could muster. "Good afternoon," replied Senator Richard Thompson, his voice deep and authoritative, but not hostile. "You must be Frank, the father of the boy who found Thunder." "Yes, sir," Frank confirmed. "That's my son, Billy." The senator looked around, taking in the humble but well-kept surroundings. His eyes settled on Billy, who had positioned himself near the horse as if to protect it. "So you're Billy," the senator said, approaching the boy. "I heard you saved my horse." Billy looked up at the most powerful man he had ever seen. There was something in the senator's gaze that wasn't entirely intimidating, a genuine curiosity that encouraged the boy to speak. "I just gave him—" "Water, sir," Billy said, his voice small but firm. "He was really thirsty." The senator stepped closer to Thunder, who immediately recognized him, whinnying softly and stretching his neck toward his owner. "Thunder, you stubborn boy," the senator said, stroking the horse's neck with obvious affection. "You gave us quite a scare." Turning back to Billy, the senator asked, "Tell me exactly where you found him and how you brought him here." Billy recounted the whole story, from the moment he saw the horse alone in the desert to his decision to bring him home. He spoke about the animal's thirst, the brand he had noticed, and the difficult walk back. The senator listened carefully, asking occasional questions and showing genuine interest in the details. "And you came all the way from the desert alone, leading Thunder?" the senator asked. "Yes, sir," Billy confirmed. "I couldn't leave him there by himself." The senator studied the boy for a long moment, as if weighing something important. "Billy, do you have any idea how valuable this horse is?" he finally asked. The boy shook his head. "No, sir. I just knew he needed help. Thunder is worth more money than your family sees in several years," the senator explained, not cruelly, just stating a fact. "He's a purebred, trained by specialists with international papers. If something had happened to him—" The senator didn't finish the sentence, but the weight of his words was felt by everyone present. Senator, Margaret interjected, gathering all her courage, we know we did the right thing by caring for the animal, but we also know he doesn't belong to us. We just wanted to help. The senator turned to the woman, noting the dignity in her posture despite her obvious nervousness. Ma'am? Margaret, sir, Margaret Smith. Mrs. Margaret, you've raised a son with a noble heart, said the senator. That's rare these days. There was a moment of silence where everyone seemed to wait for the senator's decision. Finally, he spoke again. I need to take Thunder back home, he announced. But first, I want to make you an offer. The Smith family exchanged glances, unsure what to expect. Billy, the senator said, addressing the boy directly, how would you like to work for me? Sir, Billy asked, not fully understanding the offer. I need someone to help care for my horses, the senator explained. Someone who shows the same dedication and kindness you've shown Thunder. I'm offering you a job. Frank and Margaret looked at each other, confused. A job for an 11-year-old? How would that work? Senator, Frank said cautiously. Billy's still too young to work. He needs to study. That's exactly what I'm proposing, the senator interrupted. Billy would work at my ranch, but he'd also study. I have a private school on the property for the employees' children. He'd receive a quality education while learning to care for animals professionally. The offer was tempting, but Margaret's heart ached at the thought of being separated from her youngest son. What about the family? She asked. Would Billy live at the ranch? That's the second part of my offer, the senator continued. I'm offering jobs for the whole family. Frank, you'd work directly for me, with a salary 3 times what you earn now. You'd have a house on the property, healthcare, education for all the children. The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of the wind and the occasional whinny of thunder. The Smith family tried to process an offer that seemed too good to be true. Why, sir? Margaret finally asked. Why would you do this for us? The senator stroked Thunder's neck before answering. This horse was a gift from my late wife, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. She died 2 years ago, and Thunder was one of the last connections I had to her. When he disappeared, I thought I'd lost that connection forever. He paused, looking directly at Billy. Your son didn't just save Thunder. He saved a piece of my memory of my past. That's priceless. Billy's heart pounded. The offer was incredible, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But it also meant leaving behind everything he knew. The simple home he'd grown up in. The neighbors who were like family. Can I think about it? Billy asked, surprising everyone with his maturity. Of course, the senator replied, smiling for the first time since he'd arrived. But don't take too long. I'd like to make arrangements as soon as possible. After, the senator left with Thunder, promising to return in 3 days for the family's answer. The Smiths' home was filled with an air of uncertainty and excitement. I can't believe what just happened, Margaret murmured, sinking into the kitchen chair. It feels like a dream, Frank agreed. Working for the senator, a new house, school for the boys. But what if it's too far from the life we know? Here? Tommy questioned. What if we can't adjust? Mike, always the most thoughtful, observed. It's an opportunity that might not come again. We're barely getting by here, and the senator's offering a better life. Billy stayed quiet through the family discussion. His mind was torn between the excitement of adventure and the homesickness he already felt for all he'd leave behind. But there was one thing that comforted him. He would see Thunder again. That night, no member of the Smith family could sleep properly. It was as if they were on the eve of a change they knew was irreversible, regardless of the decision they made. The next morning, neighbors began showing up at the Smiths' house. The news of the senator's visit had spread quickly through the community, and everyone wanted to know the details of what had happened. Mrs. Francis, the closest neighbor, a 70-year-old woman who had known the family for decades, was the first to arrive. Margaret, is it true that Senator Richard was here yesterday? She asked, barely able to contain her curiosity. It's true, Mrs. Francis, Margaret confirmed. Billy found one of his horses in the desert. And what did he want? The neighbor pressed. Margaret hesitated. She wasn't sure if she should share the details of the senator's offer. It was too important a decision to discuss casually with neighbors. He came to get the horse, she replied simply. But Mrs. Francis knew Margaret well and sensed there was more to the story. Margaret Smith, I've known you since you were a girl, she said with a knowing smile. "I can tell when you're hiding something. What else happened?" Margaret looked at Frank, who just nodded. Maybe it would be good to talk to someone they trusted about the situation. "He offered jobs for the whole family," she finally revealed. "He wants us to go work on his ranch." Mrs. Francis's eyes widened. "Work for Senator Richard? Margaret, do you realize what an opportunity this is?" "I do," Margaret replied. "But I also know it means leaving all of this behind." "All of this," Mrs. Francis repeated, gesturing around. "Child, here you all struggle. Just to survive. There you'd have a decent life." Billy, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped closer to the two women. "Mrs. Francis, do you think we should accept?" he asked. The elderly woman looked at the boy with affection. She had watched him grow up since birth and knew the kindness in his heart. "Billy, my boy, you saved an important animal, and now you have the chance to change your family's life," she said wisely. "Sometimes God puts opportunities in our path, and it's up to us to have the courage to take them." "But what if it goes wrong?" Billy asked, voicing the fear they all felt but hadn't put into words. "What if it goes right?" Mrs. Francis countered. "Have you thought about that?" Throughout the day, other neighbors arrived. Old Jack, owner of the dry well where Billy had found Thunder, came to say he had seen horse tracks in the area a few days earlier, but hadn't paid much attention at the time. "If I'd known it was such an important animal," he said, "I would have looked for him too." "The important thing is that Billy found him," Frank replied, "and did the right thing." In the afternoon, Father Anthony, the community's priest, came to give his blessing to the family. He was a young man, around 40, who had arrived in the area 5 years earlier and quickly became a respected and beloved figure. "Frank, Margaret," the priest greeted them, "I heard what happened yesterday. I came to talk to you about this opportunity." "Father, do you think we should accept?" Margaret asked, valuing the clergyman's opinion. "I think you should follow your hearts," Father Anthony replied, "but also use your heads. It's a chance to give your children a better education, a life with more dignity." "But what about the community?" Frank questioned. "We've always been part of this community, and you always will be," the priest assured them. "Physical distance doesn't break the bonds of the heart. Besides, you could visit whenever you wanted." Billy listened carefully to the adults' conversation, but his mind was divided. On one hand, the prospect of studying in a real school, learning to care for horses professionally, and seeing Thunder again was extremely appealing. On the other hand, there was the fear of the unknown, the uncertainty of what it would be like to live in a completely different environment. On that second night, the family gathered for a serious talk. They sat around the simple kitchen table, lit by an oil lamp, and finally put all their feelings and fears into words. "Dad," said Tommy, "I think we should accept. It's the chance of a lifetime." "I think so too," agreed Mike. "Here, what future do we have? Working the fields our whole lives, barely scraping by?" Frank looked at his older sons and then turned to Billy. "And you, Billy, what do you think?" Billy fiddled with a wooden spoon on the table, deep in thought. "I want to see Thunder again," he finally said. "And I want to learn how to care for horses, but I also don't want us to forget who we are." Margaret held her youngest son's hand. "Son, we'll never forget who we are," she assured him. "No matter where we live, we'll always be the Smith family, and we'll always have the values we learned here." "So you think we should accept?" Billy asked. "I think so," Margaret replied, looking at her husband. "And you, Frank?" Frank took a deep breath. He knew well the risks of refusing an offer from someone as powerful as the senator, but he also understood that accepting would mean a complete change in their lives. "I don't think we have much choice," he said finally. "And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's the chance we've been waiting for without realizing it." On the third day, as promised, Senator Richard Thompson returned to the Smith family's home. This time he came only with Colonel Parker and an assistant carrying a folder of documents. "Good morning, Smith family," the senator greeted them, seeming more relaxed than on his previous visit. "I hope you've had enough time to think about my proposal." "We have, sir," Frank answered, taking the lead in the conversation. "And we'd like to accept," The senator's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Excellent," and he exclaimed. "You won't regret this decision." The assistant opened the folder and began pulling out documents. "Here are the work contracts," the senator explained. "Frank, you'll be hired as the ranch's assistant manager, responsible for maintenance and general care. The starting salary is $3,000 a month plus benefits." Frank felt his legs go weak. $3,000 was more than he earned in 4 months working for Colonel Parker. "Billy," the senator continued, "will be enrolled in the ranch's school and will work part-time in the stables under the supervision of the veterinarian. He'll receive a monthly scholarship of $500. Billy could hardly believe what he was hearing. Not only would he attend a real school, but he'd also get paid for it. Tommy and Mike will also be enrolled in school and can work part-time in different areas of the ranch, depending on their skills and interests, the senator added. "And me?" Margaret asked timidly. "You'll be in charge of organizing the house where you'll live," the senator replied. "And if you're interested, you can work in the school's administration, helping with the office and organization. You'll also receive fair compensation." The offer was even better than the family had imagined. Not only would they have work and a home, but everyone would contribute to the family income and receive a quality education. "When would we start?" Frank asked. "If you'd like, next week," the senator answered. "I'll send a truck to help with the move. The house where you'll be living is already being prepared." "And can we bring our belongings?" asked Margaret. "Of course," assured the senator. "I want you to feel at home from the very first day." The contracts were signed right there, at the simple kitchen table of the Smith family. It was a historic moment for all of them, the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As the senator was getting ready to leave, Billy gathered the courage to ask a question that had been haunting him since their first meeting. "Senator, may I ask how Thunder got lost?" The senator paused and looked at the boy, a shadow of sadness crossing his face. "Thunder ran off during a storm," he explained. "Something spooked him in the stable and he managed to break the door. My men searched for him for an entire week, but with no luck. We thought maybe he had gotten hurt or—" The senator didn't finish the sentence, but Billy understood. They thought the horse might have died. "He must have walked a long way to get where I found him," Billy observed. "Yes, it must have been a hard journey for him," the senator agreed. "That's why I'm so grateful for what you did. Thunder not only survived, but found someone who cared for him as if he were his own." That afternoon, after the senator left, the Smith family home turned into a whirlwind of activity. They had only a week to prepare for a move that would completely change their lives. Margaret began sorting through what they would take and what they would leave behind. It wasn't easy deciding what was truly important after years of memories, tied to every object in the house. "Mum," said Tommy, "do we really have to take Grandma's table?" The table in question had been made by Margaret's grandfather and was one of the few family heirlooms they owned. It was rough, made of simple wood, but held decades of stories and memories. "Of course we're taking it," Margaret replied firmly. "Some things are priceless, son." Billy spent the day visiting all the places that were special to him. The tree he used to climb to see the horizon, the well where he sometimes fished, the small hill where he could spot the road. He wanted to etch everything into his memory, to make sure he'd never forget where he came from. That evening, Mrs. Francis arrived with a package in her hands. "Margaret, I brought something for you," she said, handing over the bundle. "It's some milk candy I made today, for you to enjoy in your new home and remember the taste of our land." Margaret accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. She knew she was leaving behind much more than a house or land. She was leaving a community that had welcomed her since childhood, people who were like family. "Mrs. Francis, how will we manage without you?" she asked, hugging her neighbor. "You'll do just fine," the older woman assured her. "And I expect letters telling me all about how things are over there." In the days that followed, other neighbors came by with farewell gifts, homemade sugarcane candy, seeds from local plants, small keepsakes that represented the life the family had built. There, Father Anthony visited the day before the move to bless the family and wish them well on their new journey. "May God guide you in this new chapter of your lives," he said, making the sign of the cross over each family member. "And may you never Forget that you carry in your hearts all the good you've learned here. On the morning of the move, a large modern truck arrived at the Smith family home. Two uniformed men stepped out and introduced themselves as workers from the senator's ranch, sent to help with the move. "Good morning," greeted the older of the two. "I'm Charlie, the ranch foreman. I've come to fetch you myself." Charlie was a man around 50, with a weathered complexion and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work in the fields. But there was a difference in his demeanor, a dignity that came from having a respected and well-paid job. "It's a pleasure to meet the family that saved Thunder," he said with a sincere smile. "The senator can't stop talking about you." Billy timidly approached the foreman. "Do you know Thunder?" he asked. "Sure do, son," replied Charlie. "I'm the one who takes care of the ranch's top horses. Thunder's been missing you something." "Fierce. Missing me?" Billy asked, incredulous. "Of course," Charlie confirmed. "Horses are smart animals with good memories. He knows you saved him." The loading of the family's belongings was done quickly and carefully. The ranch hands treated each item with respect, as if they understood the sentimental value those simple things held for the Smith family. When everything was ready and the family prepared to leave, neighbors from all around came to say goodbye. It was as if the whole community wanted to show their support and affection for the Smiths. "So you'll do just fine," said old Jack, shaking Frank's hand, "and don't forget about us." "We never will," Frank promised, genuinely moved. Billy took one last look at the house where he'd been born and raised. It was small and simple, but it had been home to his family for years. He felt a mix of sadness and excitement he couldn't quite explain. "Ready, Billy?" asked Margaret, noticing her son's hesitation. "Yes, Mom," he replied, taking a deep breath. "Let's go meet our new life." The trip to the senator's ranch took nearly 3 hours. Billy spent the whole time pressed against the truck window, watching the landscape change as they moved farther from home. Gradually, the dry, rough desert gave way to greener vegetation, a sign they were nearing a more prosperous region. Charlie, who was driving the truck, pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area. "Up ahead, you'll see the ranch entrance," he announced as they neared their destination. "It's a big property, almost 15,000 acres. Billy tried to imagine 15,000 acres, but his young mind couldn't grasp something so vast. When they reached the main gate of the ranch, Billy's heart raced. It was an imposing structure with stone columns and a wrought iron gate bearing the same symbol he'd seen branded on Thunder's flank. "Welcome to Thompson Ranch," said Charlie, stopping the truck so they could admire the entrance. Ahead stretched a paved road lined with well-kept trees. In the distance, buildings stood that seemed like small towns compared to the simple homes they knew. "It's huge," murmured Tommy, awestruck. "Sure is," Charlie agreed, "but you'll get used to it fast. It's a good place to live." As they drove further into the property, Billy stared wide-eyed at everything. Green fields stretched to the horizon, cattle grazed peacefully, and modern, well-maintained buildings stood tall. It was like stepping into a whole new world. "That's the school where you'll study," Charlie pointed to a modern building with multiple classrooms and a large courtyard. "And up ahead are the stables for the special horses." Billy's heart leaped at the mention of the stables. He'd finally see Thunder again. "Can I see Thunder now?" he asked eagerly. "Hold on, son," Charlie laughed. "First we'll get you settled in your new house. Then you'll have plenty of time to visit the horses." The house prepared for the Smith family was a revelation. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living room, a spacious kitchen, and even a small porch. For a family used to squeezing into 2 rooms, it felt like a palace. "Gosh, my God," whispered Margaret, exploring the modern kitchen with its refrigerator, stove, and even a microwave. "I don't even know how to use half of these things." "Don't worry," reassured Charlie. "Tomorrow, one of the other employees' wives will come by to teach you what you need to know. Here, everyone helps everyone." Billy ran through the rooms, amazed by the space and the fact that he and his brothers would each have their own bedrooms. There were large windows that let in plenty of natural light, clean ceramic floors, and walls painted in bright, cheerful colors. "Son," called Frank, "come see what's in the backyard." Billy rushed outside and could hardly believe his eyes. There was a small garden already planted, some fruit trees, and even a fish pond. "Is all this really ours?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes, it is," confirmed Charlie. "The senator insists that every family has the means to grow some of their own food. It's a way to ensure independence and a good quality of life." After settling their basic belongings and getting familiar with the house, Charlie finally took Billy to see the stables. It was an impressive complex with individual stalls, a training area, storage for feed and equipment, and even a small veterinary clinic. "There are 25 horses here," Charlie explained as they walked. "All purebred, each worth a fortune. Thunder is one of the most special ones." When they reached Thunder's stall, Billy's legs nearly gave way from excitement. The horse stood there, beautiful and healthy, his coat gleaming under the soft stable light. As Billy approached, Thunder let out a soft whinny and stretched his neck toward the boy. "Thunder," Billy exclaimed, running to hug the horse's neck. "You're okay. You look amazing." Charlie watched the scene with a smile. He'd worked with horses his whole life and had rarely seen such an instant, genuine connection between a child and an animal. "He remembers you," he observed. "Look how calm and happy he is." Billy spent long minutes petting Thunder, whispering affectionate words and feeling a happiness he hadn't known since leaving the horse with the senator. It was like reuniting with a dear friend after a long separation. "Charlie," Billy said, finally stepping back slightly, "can I help take care of him?" "Of course you can," the foreman replied. "In fact, that's exactly what the senator wants. You'll learn everything about caring for horses, and Thunder will be your main partner in that." That first night at the ranch, the Smith family gathered on the porch of their new home to talk about their first impressions. The air was cooler than back home, more humid, and the silence was different, less absolute, filled with the sounds of a thriving, active property. "I can't believe this is happening to us," said Margaret, admiring the lights from the other houses scattered across the estate. "It's like a dream," Frank agreed, "but a good dream, one we hope never ends." "Do you think we'll be able to adjust?" asked Mike, voicing a concern they all shared. "We will," Tommy said with conviction. "We've always adapted to everything, and now we have much better conditions for it." Billy stayed quiet, thinking about Thunder and the new life that was beginning. There were fears and uncertainties, but also a hopeful excitement that reassured him. "Billy," Margaret asked, "are you happy?" The boy smiled, looking up at the stars that seemed brighter in this new sky. "Yes, Mom," he answered sincerely. "I think we made the right choice." The next day, their new roles at the ranch officially began. Frank was introduced to management work, which involved overseeing equipment maintenance, coordinating small repairs, and taking care of the property's general infrastructure. Tommy and Mike were assigned to different areas. Tommy to the agricultural sector, where he would learn about mechanized planting and harvesting, and Mike to administration, where he would help with inventory control and organization. Margaret was introduced to the school team, where she discovered she would be responsible for assisting in the office and also coordinating extracurricular activities for the students. Billy, in turn, was assigned to the stables, where he would work under the direct supervision of Charlie and the ranch's veterinarian, Dr. Robert. "Billy," said Dr. Robert, a young man around 30 years old who had graduated from a prestigious university, "you'll learn everything about equine anatomy, nutrition, basic veterinary care, and animal psychology." "Animal psychology?" Billy asked, curious. "Yes," the veterinarian explained. "Horses are very intelligent and sensitive animals. To take good care of them, we need to understand how they think and feel." The first weeks on the ranch passed like a whirlwind of learning and adaptation. Billy discovered there was much more to learn about horses than he had imagined. It wasn't just about feeding and watering them, but understanding balanced nutrition, specific schedules, proper exercise, and preventive veterinary care. Thunder became his main partner in this learning process. The horse seemed to understand that Billy was there to learn and patiently cooperated with all the exercises and care. "Thunder really is special," Charlie remarked one morning, watching the interaction between the boy and the horse. "He doesn't just accept anyone so easily." "Why is he so special?" Billy asked, carefully brushing the animal's mane. "Besides being from a rare lineage, he was personally trained by the senator's late wife," Charlie explained. Lady Elizabeth was an exceptional horsewoman. She knew horses like no one else. Thunder was one of her last projects. Billy stopped brushing for a moment, processing the information. Did the senator's wife love horses that much? She adored them, Charlie replied warmly. She used to say horses were mirrors of the human soul, reflecting our true essence. That's why the senator holds Thunder so dear. The ranch's school was a revelation for Billy and his siblings. It had well-equipped labs, a well-stocked library, qualified teachers, and modern teaching methods for children used to studying. In makeshift classrooms with few resources, this represented a huge leap in the quality of education. Billy, said the science teacher, Professor Marina, you show a special interest in animal biology. Have you ever thought about specializing in that field? Billy had never seriously considered his professional future, but the teacher's suggestion planted a seed in his mind. Maybe he could become a veterinarian, helping animals like he had helped Thunder. Tommy and Mike also adapted quickly to their roles. Tommy discovered a fascination for modern agriculture, the technological equipment, and the sustainable planting techniques the ranch used. Mike showed an aptitude for administration and numbers, quickly becoming a valuable asset in organizing the property's records. Margaret flourished in her work at the school. She found she had a knack for working with children and that her life experiences were valued by the teachers and administration. Frank, meanwhile, demonstrated an administrative competence he hadn't even known he possessed. His practical experience combined with natural good sense made him an efficient manager, respected by the other employees. After 2 months on the ranch, the Smith family had found their place in the new community. They had made friends, established routines, and built solid relationships. It was as if they had always belonged to that place. But then, complications began to arise. One day, Billy was taking care of Thunder when he heard raised voices coming from the senator's office. He couldn't quite make out what was being discussed, but the tone didn't sound friendly. "Charlie," he asked the foreman, "is something going on?" Charlie glanced toward the office and sighed. "Administrative matters, Billy," he replied vaguely. "Nothing you need to worry about." But Billy sensed there was more to it. In the following days, he noticed some workers seemed worried, whispering among themselves and stopping their conversations when he approached. His concern grew when Frank came home one night with a serious expression. "Margaret," he said to his wife, "we need to talk." Billy and his brothers went to their rooms, but naturally tried to listen to their parents' conversation. What they heard alarmed them. "There's a group of ranchers in the area who aren't happy with how the senator treats his workers," Frank explained. "They think he pays wages that are too high and offers too many benefits." "And what's the problem with that?" Margaret asked, confused. "The problem is, it's making workers on other ranches demand better conditions," Frank continued, "and the other ranchers don't want to give them." "So they're pressuring the senator to cut back on benefits?" Margaret guessed. "That's right," Frank confirmed. "And there are rumors some are even questioning the senator's methods with the local authorities." Billy felt a chill in his stomach. Were they questioning the senator who had changed their lives, the man who had given them a chance when they needed it? The next day at school, Billy noticed some children of workers from other ranches looking at him with hostility. During recess, a group of them approached him. "So you're the kid who found the senator's horse," said a taller boy, about 15. "Must think you're real important now." "I don't think I'm important," Billy replied, trying to avoid confrontation. "No?" the boy pressed. "Then why did you and your family get jobs just for returning a horse?" "We work," Billy defended himself. "We deserve what we have." "Deserve?" Another boy in the group laughed. "My father's worked for Colonel Parker for 20 years and earns less than your dad, who just got here." Billy didn't know how to respond. It wasn't his fault other bosses didn't treat their workers well, but he was starting to understand that their privileged situation was causing resentment. "Listen," the first boy continued, "if things get tough for the senator because of you, who do you think will pay the price?" The threat, even if indirect, left Billy feeling uneasy for the rest of the day. When he got home, he told his parents what had happened. "Dad," Billy said, "is our being here causing trouble for the senator?" Frank and Margaret exchanged glances. It was a difficult question, touching on the heart of the worries that had been growing over the past few weeks. "Son," Frank finally said, "sometimes people get jealous when they see others doing better. That doesn't mean we've done anything wrong. But what if the senator gets hurt because of us?" Billy insisted. "What if he loses the ranch because of us?" "Billy, that won't happen," Margaret reassured him. "The senator is a powerful man. He has influence, connections. A few jealous ranchers won't be able to seriously harm him." But his mother's words didn't completely ease Billy's worries. He had found Thunder by chance, but now he felt as if he carried a huge responsibility for everything that had followed. The tensions in the region continued to grow in the following weeks. There were meetings among the local ranchers, some of which the senator was forced to attend. Billy noticed he returned from these meetings looking tired and worried. One afternoon, while tending to Thunder, Billy had a conversation that would change his perspective on everything that was happening. "Billy," called a familiar voice. It was Senator Richard, who rarely visited the stables in person. Billy quickly stood up, wiping his hands on his clothes. "Good afternoon, Senator," he greeted respectfully. "Good afternoon, Billy," replied the senator, approaching Thunder. "How is he?" "He's doing well, sir," Billy answered. "Getting stronger and more handsome every day." The senator stroked the horse's neck, and Thunder clearly showed joy at seeing his owner. "Billy, can I ask you a personal question?" the senator said, not taking his eyes off the animal. "Of course, sir." "Do you regret finding Thunder that day?" The question caught Billy by surprise. He looked at the senator, trying to understand what had prompted it. "Why do you ask, sir?" "Because I know some people are saying your family only got this job out of luck, that you don't deserve to be here," the senator explained. "I wanted to know if that bothers you." Billy thought carefully before answering. "Sir, I don't regret helping Thunder," he said firmly. "He needed help and I helped him. If that brought good things to my family, I'm happy, but we didn't do anything wrong." The senator smiled for the first time in weeks. "You're right, Billy," he said. "You didn't do anything wrong. You did what was right, and you were rewarded for it. There's nothing wrong with that." "But, sir," Billy continued, gathering courage, "people are saying you're having trouble because of us. Is that true?" The senator sighed, showing for the first time the pressure he was under. "I'm facing some difficulties, yes," he admitted, "but they're not caused by you. They're caused by people who can't accept that there are better ways to treat employees." "Will you be able to fix it?" Billy asked, genuinely concerned. "I will," the senator assured him with determination. "And do you know why? Because I'm right. Because treating people with dignity is always the right thing to do, no matter what others think." This conversation reassured Billy temporarily, but the problems were far from over. In fact, they were only beginning to intensify. A few days later, Frank came home with troubling news. "Margaret," he said, clearly agitated, "today an inspector showed up at the ranch." "An inspector?" she asked, sensing trouble. "A labor inspector," Frank explained. "He came to investigate the working conditions here at the ranch. Someone filed a complaint." "A complaint about what?" Margaret asked, indignant. "The conditions here are excellent." "Exactly," Frank agreed. "But the complaint wasn't about bad conditions. It was about conditions being too good." "What do you mean?" "They said the senator was offering irregular benefits, paying wages above market rate suspiciously, as if he were trying to hide something," Frank explained. Margaret sat heavily in her chair, processing the information. Could this cause trouble for the senator? "It could complicate things for him," Frank admitted. "And if it complicates things for him, it complicates things for all of us." Billy, who had overheard his parents' conversation, felt the weight of responsibility grow on his shoulders. Everything had started with his decision to help a lost horse, and now it seemed that decision was causing problems for people who didn't deserve it. At school, tensions were also rising. The children of employees from other ranches had become more hostile, and some teachers seemed uncomfortable with the political situation unfolding. "Billy," said Professor Marina after class, "have you noticed the tensions at school?" "I have, Professor," Billy replied sadly. "I want you to know this has nothing to do with you or your family," she assured him. "You're excellent students and good people. The problem is the adults who can't resolve their differences civilly." But even the teacher's encouraging words couldn't fully dispel the guilt Billy carried. The situation reached its peak one morning when Billy arrived at the stables to find Charlie in a panic. "Billy!" the foreman shouted as soon as he saw him. "Thunder is gone!" Billy's world stopped. Had Thunder disappeared again? "What do you mean gone?" he asked, running to the horse's stall. "I don't know," Charlie answered, clearly desperate. "When I got here this morning, the stall door was open, and he wasn't there." Billy examined the empty stall, searching for clues. The door was indeed open, but there were no signs of a struggle or a frantic escape. "Charlie," Billy said, a terrible suspicion forming in his mind, "what if someone took Thunder?" "Took him," the foreman repeated, as if the idea hadn't occurred to him. "Who would do such a thing?" "Someone who wants to cause trouble for the senator," Billy replied, his voice trembling. Charlie paled as he understood the implications. "My God," he murmured, "if someone really stole Thunder..." "The senator will be devastated," Billy finished, "and he'll blame everyone, including my family." They immediately reported the disappearance to the senator, who arrived at the stables within minutes. His expression was a mix of despair and controlled fury. "Who had access to the stables last night?" he asked, his voice icy. "Just me and Billy," Charlie answered, "and the security guards on patrol." "All the guards are being investigated," the senator informed them, "but I suspect this was done by an outsider, someone familiar with the property." Billy felt worse by the minute. Thunder was gone again, and this time it wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately taken the horse from his safe place, likely to hurt the senator. "Senator," Billy said, gathering all his courage, "I can look for him. I found him once. I can find him again." The senator looked at the boy, seeing the determination in his eyes. "Billy, I appreciate the offer, but this time is different," he said gently. "If Thunder was really stolen, whoever did it could be dangerous." "But I know Thunder," Billy insisted. "He recognizes me, trusts me. Maybe I can help somehow." Frank, who had arrived as soon as he heard about the disappearance, stepped closer to his son. "Billy, the senator is right," he said. "This could be dangerous. Let the adults handle it." But Billy couldn't accept standing by while Thunder was lost. Again. The horse he'd saved in the desert, who had become his best friend, was in danger, and he felt he had to help. That night, as the family discussed the situation, Billy made a decision that would change everything once more. "Dad," he said during dinner, "what if we looked for clues about where Thunder might be?" "Billy, we've already talked about this," Frank replied. "It's the adults' responsibility." "But Dad, I know horses now," Billy argued. "I've learned so much from Charlie and Dr. Robert. Maybe I'd notice things others wouldn't." Tommy and Mike looked at their younger brother with admiration. Even though he was the youngest, Billy showed a courage and determination that impressed them. "Billy's right," said Tommy. "We could at least ask around, see if anyone noticed anything strange." "That's a good idea," agreed Mike. "We know the area, we know the people. Maybe we can get some useful information." Margaret looked at her three sons, seeing the determination in each of their eyes. "But what if you get into trouble?" she asked, worried. "Mom, we're just going to ask questions," Billy assured her. "We won't do anything dangerous." Frank observed his family, considering the proposal. He knew his children's kindness and intelligence well, and believed they might actually uncover something useful. "All right," he finally agreed, "but on one condition. You stick together, don't separate, and if you find anything suspicious, you come back immediately and tell the adults." "We promise," said Billy, his eyes shining with renewed hope. The next day, after school and work, the three brothers began their own investigation. They started by asking the other ranch workers if they'd noticed anything unusual in recent days. "Mrs. Mercy," Billy asked the ranch cook, "did you see any strange cars around here yesterday?" "Not that I recall, dear," she replied thoughtfully. "But now that you mention it, Joe the gatekeeper said a truck passed by pretty late yesterday. He said it was a delivery for the ranch next door." "A delivery at night?" asked Tommy, finding it odd. "I thought so too," agreed Mrs. Mercy. "Deliveries usually come during the day." The brothers exchanged glances, thinking they might have found an important clue. "Do you know which ranch it was?" asked Mike. "I think it was Colonel Parker's," replied Mrs. Mercy. "At least that's what I understood." Billy's heart raced. Colonel Parker was his father's former boss. He knew the senator's ranch, knew where the stables were. Could he have stolen Thunder? "Let's talk to Joe the gatekeeper," Tommy whispered to his brothers. Joe the gatekeeper was an elderly man who managed vehicle access to the ranch. He knew every worker and visitor, had a sharp memory, and noticed everything. "Old Joe," Mike greeted respectfully. "We wanted to ask about the truck that came through last night." "Ah, yes," replied the old gatekeeper. "I thought it was strange too. It was a cattle truck, but it wasn't carrying any cattle." "How do you know?" asked Billy. "Because when it left it was empty," explained old Joe, "and it left in a hurry like someone was rushing." "Did you see who was driving?" asked Tommy. "I did," confirmed the gatekeeper. "It was Jack, one of Colonel Parker's men. I've known him for years." The three brothers exchanged meaningful looks. Now they had a solid lead. One of Colonel Parker's workers had entered the ranch with an empty truck and left quickly. It was very suspicious. "Old Joe," said Billy, "can you give us an exact description of the truck?" "Of course," replied the gatekeeper. "It was a Ford truck, white, with a license plate starting with PEB. There's a red mark on the right side." Billy memorized every detail. Now they had enough evidence to suspect Thunder might be at Colonel Parker's ranch. "Thank you, old Joe," said Mike. "You've helped us a lot." As they walked away from the gate, the three brothers discussed their findings. "We have to tell Dad," said Tommy. "We will," agreed Billy. "But first, how about we take a look at Colonel Parker's ranch?" "Billy!" exclaimed Mike. "We promised we wouldn't do anything dangerous." "We won't," Billy argued. "We'll just look from a distance. If we see the truck or any sign of Thunder, we turn back and tell the adults." Tommy considered the proposal. Colonel Parker's ranch was relatively close and they knew the area well. "Just a quick look from a distance," he finally agreed. "But if we see anything suspicious, we run." "Deal," said Billy, excited at the prospect of maybe finding Thunder. Colonel Parker's ranch was about 3 miles from the senator's ranch. The three brothers walked along the main road until they neared the gate, then hid behind a small hill where they could observe part of the property. "Look there," whispered Tommy, pointing to a shed at the back of the property. "There's a white truck parked there." Billy strained his eyes, trying to see better. "Looks like the one old Joe described," he murmured. "And look at that," said Mike, pointing elsewhere. "There's a horse alone in that small pasture, far from the others." Billy looked in the direction his brother pointed and felt his heart race. Even from a distance, there was something familiar about that horse's stance. "That's Thunder," he said with certainty. "I'm sure it's him." "Are you really sure?" asked Tommy. "From far away, all horses look the same." "No, it's him," Billy insisted. "I'd recognize Thunder anywhere. It's the way he stands, how he moves his head." Mike studied the isolated horse carefully. "He really does seem separated from the others," he observed. "Why would they do that to a normal horse?" "Because he's not a normal horse," Billy replied. "It's Thunder, and they know he's too valuable to mix with the others." The three brothers watched for a few more minutes, confirming their suspicions. The horse in the isolated pasture really did seem to be Thunder, and the white truck matched the description they'd been given. "Now we can tell Dad," said Tommy. "We have enough evidence." They ran back home, thrilled by their discovery. Finally, they had solid information that could help recover Thunder. When they got home, they found Frank talking seriously with Margaret. Their parents' expressions weren't good. "Dad," called Billy, still panting from the run. "We found out where Thunder is." "Found out what?" asked Frank, surprised. "He's at Colonel Parker's ranch," Tommy quickly explained. "There's a suspicious truck there and a horse alone that Billy's sure is Thunder." Frank and Margaret exchanged glances, but their expressions didn't show the joy the boys had expected. "Boys," Frank said gravely, "sit down, we need to talk." The serious tone made the three brothers realize something was wrong. "What is it, Dad?" asked Billy, sensing bad news. "This afternoon we had a talk with the senator," Frank began. "He called us to explain the situation the ranch is in." "What situation?" asked Mike. "The political pressure has increased," Margaret explained. Other ranchers are joining forces against the senator, making accusations, causing trouble for his business. And the theft of Thunder was the last straw, Frank continued. The senator thinks the people around him might be in danger. Billy felt a chill in his stomach. Danger how? People who feel threatened can do dangerous things, Frank explained. And the senator doesn't want any of his workers getting hurt because of his problems. Dad, said Tommy, starting to understand where this was going, are you saying that... I'm saying the senator suggested it might be best for our family to leave the ranch temporarily, Frank confirmed, the words coming out with difficulty. Until things calm down. The silence that followed was devastating. Billy felt as if the world was crumbling around him once again. But Dad, he finally protested, we found out where Thunder is. We can help get him back. Billy, son, this information is important and we'll pass it on to the senator, said Frank. But that doesn't change the fact that our being here is making things harder for him. So we're leaving? Asked Mike, heartbroken. It's not forever, Margaret reassured him. It's just temporary, until things settle down. But Billy knew that when poor families like theirs left places like this, they rarely made it back. That was how the world worked, and there was nothing he could do to change it. What about Thunder? He asked, his voice trembling. Who's going to take care of him when he comes back? Frank walked over to his youngest son and hugged him. Charlie, we'll look after him just fine, he promised. And when you're older, when all this is over, maybe you can come back and work with horses again. But his father's words sounded like empty promises to Billy. He had found his place in the world, discovered his passion, made the most special connection of his life. And now it was all being taken away from him again. That night, Billy barely slept. He kept thinking about Thunder, alone and confused at Colonel Parker's ranch, not understanding why he'd been taken from his home. He thought about the senator, probably desperate over the horse's disappearance. He thought about the unfairness of having to leave the ranch just when he'd found information that could fix everything. By morning, Billy had made a decision. One, he knew was risky, but felt was the only right thing to do. Mike, he whispered to his brother, can you help me with something? Depends what it is, Mike replied, suspicious. I want to go to Colonel Parker's ranch this morning before we talk to the senator, Billy said. I need to be absolutely sure. It's Thunder there. Billy, that's crazy, Mike protested. What if we get caught? We won't, Billy insisted. It'll be quick, just to confirm. Then we'll tell the senator for sure. Mike hesitated. He understood his brother's need to be certain, but he also feared the consequences. What if it's a trap? He asked. What if they're waiting for someone to show up? Who'd expect 3 kids? Billy argued. We're small. We'll go unnoticed. Finally, Mike agreed, convinced by his brother's logic and the need for solid information before speaking to the senator. Tommy at first refused, thinking it was too risky, but he gave in, not wanting to let his brothers go alone. The 3 left the house early before their parents woke up, leaving a note saying they'd gone for a walk and would be back for breakfast. The walk to Colonel Parker's ranch was tense. Every noise made them stop and look around. Every rustle in the brush put them on edge. When they got close to the property, they repeated their strategy from the day before, hiding behind the rise, where they could watch unseen. Look, Tommy whispered, the horse is still in the same spot. Billy strained his eyes, carefully studying the animal from a distance. The more he looked, the more certain he was. It was Thunder. It's him, he said firmly. I'm absolutely sure. How can we be sure without getting closer? Mike asked. Billy thought for a moment, then had an idea. I'll try calling him, he said. If it's really Thunder, he'll recognize me. Billy, have you lost your mind? Tommy protested. If you yell, they'll hear you. I won't yell, Billy explained. I'll make the sound I always use to call him. It's quiet, but he knows it. Before the brothers could protest, Billy put his fingers to his mouth and let out a low melodic whistle, a specific sound he had developed to communicate with Thunder. The horse in the isolated pasture immediately lifted its head and looked in the direction of the sound. Then, to the astonishment of the 3 brothers, the animal began walking toward them, approaching the fence that bordered the pasture. My God, murmured Mike, it really is Thunder. The horse reached the fence closest to where they stood and let out a soft whinny, clearly trying to communicate with Billy. "He recognized me," Billy said, emotional. "He knows it's me." But the joy of the reunion was interrupted by a rough voice behind them. "So you're the spies who were snooping around here yesterday?" The three brothers turned and saw a large, scowling man approaching. It was Jack, Colonel Parker's employee who had driven the suspicious truck. "We're not spies," protested Tommy, trying to stay calm. "No?" Jack laughed humorlessly. "Then what are you doing here, spying on our property?" "We were just walking," lied Mike. "Walking and whistling for the horse, huh?" Jack said, stepping closer. "You know exactly whose horse that is." Billy felt his heart pounding, but he didn't want to show fear. "It's Thunder," he said bravely. "And he shouldn't be here." Jack stopped, surprised by the boy's boldness. "Oh, really?" he asked with a sly grin. "And who are you to say where a horse should or shouldn't be?" "I'm Billy Smith," the boy replied, lifting his chin. "And this horse belongs to Senator Richard Thompson." "Ah, you're the boy who found the horse," Jack said, now understanding who they were. "The famous Billy Smith." There was something in the way he said the name that sent a chill down Billy's spine. "Colonel Parker wants to talk to you," Jack announced. "Let's head to the main house." "We don't want to talk to anyone," Tommy said, taking a step back. "We're leaving." "Oh, but you're already here," Jack said, blocking their way out. It'd be rude not to greet the owner of the house. The three brothers exchanged glances, realizing they were in a tough spot. They couldn't run because Jack was bigger and faster, and they clearly had no choice but to go with him. "Fine," Billy said finally. "We'll talk to Colonel Parker." The walk to the ranch's main house was tense. Jack led them as if they were prisoners, and the three brothers tried to stay calm while figuring out how to get out of the situation. Colonel Parker's house was smaller than the senator's mansion, but still impressive by local standards. It was an old, well-maintained building with a wide porch where a few rocking chairs suggested it was a place for rest and contemplation. Colonel Parker was sitting in one of those chairs, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. When he saw Jack approaching with the three boys, he stood up with an expression mixing surprise and irritation. "What's this, Jack?" he asked. "Found these three snooping around our property, Colonel," Jack explained. "They're Frank Smith's kids, that family who works for the senator." The colonel studied the three brothers with calculating eyes. "So you're the famous Smith family," he said finally. "The family that changed their lives overnight." "Good morning, Colonel," Tommy greeted respectfully, trying to keep things civil. "Good morning," the colonel replied curtly. "Now explain. What you were doing spying on my property?" Billy decided to be direct. "We were looking for Thunder," he said bravely. "The horse that was stolen from the senator's ranch." The colonel raised his eyebrows, feigning surprise. "Stolen?" he repeated. "What's this about a stolen horse?" "You know very well," continued Billy, feeling his indignation grow. "He's out there in the isolated pasture. I recognized him." "Boy," said the colonel, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "are you accusing me of theft?" Tommy moved closer to his younger brother, sensing the situation was turning dangerous. "Colonel, we just want to find the horse," he interjected. "If he's here, maybe we can settle this amicably." The colonel laughed without humor. "Settle this amicably?" he repeated. "You trespass on my property, accuse me of theft, and now want to settle things amicably?" Mike tried a different approach. "Colonel, we might be mistaken," he said diplomatically. "Maybe the horse we saw isn't Thunder." "Maybe it isn't," agreed the colonel with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "How about you boys stay here a while I confirm that information?" "Actually, we need to get back home," said Tommy, sensing that staying wouldn't be a good idea. "Our parents will worry." "Your parents?" asked the colonel. "Yes, your father Frank worked for me for years. Always been an honest, hard-working man. A shame he got swept up in this get-rich-quick nonsense." "It wasn't nonsense," defended Billy. "My father works hard at the senator's ranch." "Does he now?" questioned the colonel. "And do you think the salary he gets matches the work he does?" The question caught Billy off guard. He'd never thought specifically about the relationship between his father's work and his pay. "My father deserves what he earns," he said, finally. "Deserves?" repeated the colonel. "For finding a lost horse?" "For working honestly," corrected Billy firmly. The colonel studied the boy for a long moment, as if weighing his character. "You know, Billy," he said at last, "you remind me of your father when he was young. The same stubbornness, the same innocence." There was something in the Colonel's tone that made Billy uneasy. "Colonel," said Tommy, trying to end the conversation, "can we leave now?" "Of course," replied the Colonel, "but first I want to make you boys an offer." The three brothers exchanged wary glances. "What kind of offer?" asked Mike cautiously. "One that could solve everyone's problems," said the Colonel, settling back into his rocking chair. "Sit down, I'll explain." The boys remained standing, ready to bolt if needed. "You know the senator's situation is complicated, don't you?" began the Colonel. "The authorities are looking into his dealings. Other ranchers are uniting against his methods." "What does that have to do with us?" asked Tommy. "Everything," replied the Colonel. "You're the symbol of everything wrong with how the senator does business." "How so?" asked Billy, confused. "A family that gets jobs and extraordinary benefits just for returning a lost horse," explained the Colonel. "That's not fair to families who've worked here for decades without getting a fraction of what you have." Mike began to see where the Colonel was going. "And what's your proposal?" "Simple," said the Colonel. "You move back to your old home, your family stops working for the senator, and everything goes back to normal." "And in return?" asked Tommy, suspecting there was more. "In return, I guarantee your father a job with me, under the same conditions as before," offered the Colonel. "And I'll forget this trespassing business." Billy felt his indignation flare. "And thunder?" he asked. "What thunder?" replied the Colonel with feigned innocence. "I don't see any thunder here. He's right there in the pasture," protested Billy. "That's a horse I bought yesterday from a cattle trader," said the Colonel calmly. "I have all the purchase documents." Billy realized he was facing an elaborate scam, but had no way to prove anything. "You have until tomorrow to decide," announced the Colonel, standing up. "Jack will escort you off the property." On the way back home, the three brothers walked in silence, each processing what had happened. "He's lying about buying the horse," Billy finally said. "Of course he is," Tommy agreed, "but he has fake documents and his word carries more weight than ours." "What are we going to do?" asked Mike. "We'll tell Dad and the senator everything," Billy decided. "They'll know what to do." When they got home, they found Frank and Margaret extremely worried. The note they'd left hadn't eased their parents' anxiety, and they were considering going out to look for them. "Where were you?" Margaret asked, rushing to hug her sons. "Mom, we found out where Thunder is," Billy said quickly. "He's at Colonel Parker's ranch." "How do you know that?" Frank asked, sensing his sons had gotten into something dangerous. Tommy recounted the whole morning's adventure, from their decision to go to the Colonel's ranch to the tense conversation with the owner. "You did something very reckless," Frank said when Tommy finished. "You could have gotten hurt or worse." "But Dad, we found out where Thunder," Billy insisted, "and the Colonel practically admitted he stole him." "He admitted nothing," Margaret corrected. "He denied everything and even made a threat." "What threat?" Frank asked. "He said he'd forget about the trespassing if we go back to our old life," Mike explained. Frank sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "This is getting more complicated than I imagined," he murmured. "Dad, should we tell the senator?" Billy asked. "Yes," Frank decided. "He needs to know everything." An hour later, the entire Smith family was in the senator's office, recounting the morning's events. The senator listened carefully, asking occasional questions and taking notes. "Are you absolutely sure it was Thunder?" he finally asked. "Yes, sir," Billy answered firmly. "He recognized me when I whistled." "And Colonel Parker denied everything?" "He did, and claimed he has documents proving he bought the horse yesterday," Tommy confirmed. The senator fell silent for a long moment, clearly thinking through the implications of what he'd heard. "Senator," Frank said, "the Colonel made an offer. He said if our family leaves the ranch and goes back to our old life, he'll forget about the trespassing. And he also said it would solve your problems with the other ranchers," Mike added. The senator looked at the Smith family, seeing the worry on all their faces. "Do you want to accept the Colonel's offer?" he asked. "No," Billy exclaimed immediately. "We want to stay here and help you get Thunder back." "Billy," the senator said gently, "this could be very dangerous. If Colonel Parker really stole Thunder, he won't hesitate to do worse to protect his interests." "Sir," Billy said, gathering all his courage, "when I found Thunder in the desert, he was in danger. I didn't leave him there because it wasn't safe for me. Now he's in danger again, and I won't abandon him again." The senator studied the boy, seeing the determination and bravery in his young eyes. "Billy, you're a courageous child," he said finally. "But sometimes courage needs to be tempered with caution." "Sir," Frank interjected, "what do you think we should do?" The senator rose and walked to the window, gazing at the landscape of the ranch where so much had changed in recent months. "I'll be honest with you," he finally said. "The political situation is truly complicated. If I try to confront Colonel Parker directly, I might end up causing more trouble. For everyone." "So he gets to keep Thunder?" asked Billy, horrified. "I didn't say that," replied the senator. "I said I can't confront him directly, but there are other ways to resolve this." "What ways?" asked Tommy, curious. "Ways that require patience, planning, and above all, solid evidence," explained the senator. "Evidence like what the boys found?" asked Margaret. "Exactly," confirmed the senator. "But we need more. We need proof that can't be disputed." Billy felt frustration growing inside him. Thunder was so close, yet at the same time he seemed as far away as when he was lost in the desert. "Senator," he finally said, "what can I do to help?" The senator sat back down, looking directly at the boy. "Billy, the best way you can help right now is by being patient and letting the adults handle the situation," he said. "I know it's hard, but sometimes the best action is to wait." "But what if the colonel hurts Thunder?" asked Billy, voicing his greatest fear. "He won't hurt Thunder," the senator reassured him. "A horse of that value is far more useful whole and healthy. The colonel may be many things, but he's not stupid." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with the senator explaining that he had hired private investigators to gather evidence about Thunder's disappearance. He also mentioned consulting lawyers about the best legal steps to take. When the Smith family left the office, Billy felt a little calmer but still deeply worried. He knew the senator was a powerful and intelligent man, but he also knew Colonel Parker was no easy opponent. That afternoon, as Billy tended to the other horses in the stable, trying to keep his mind occupied, Charlie approached with a serious expression. "Billy," the foreman said, "we need to talk." "What is it, Charlie?" asked the boy, noticing the concern in the foreman's voice. "I've heard that Colonel Parker is spreading rumors about your family," Charlie said cautiously. "What kind of rumors?" asked Billy, a chill running through him. "He's saying you trespassed on his property, made threats, that you're causing trouble in the area," Charlie explained. Billy felt indignation rise. "That's not true," he protested. "We were just looking for Thunder." "I know it's not true," Charlie reassured him, "and the senator knows too, but other ranchers are believing the colonel's version." "What does that mean?" asked Billy, sensing bad news. "It means the pressure against the senator is growing," Charlie explained, "and your family might be in an even tougher spot." Billy sat on a nearby bench, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. It had all started with an act of kindness, but now it seemed like every attempt to do the right thing only made things worse. "Charlie," he finally asked, "do you think my family should accept the colonel's offer and leave?" Charlie studied the boy for a long moment before answering. "Billy, I can't make that decision for you," he said at last. "But I can tell you that your family has brought joy and purpose to this ranch. It would be a real loss if you left." "But what if our being here causes more harm than good?" Billy pressed. "The trouble isn't caused by you," Charlie said firmly. "They're caused by people who can't accept that there are better ways to treat employees and run a business." That night, the Smith family gathered again to discuss the situation. The pressures were mounting from all sides, and they needed to make a decision. "Maybe we should accept the colonel's offer," said Margaret reluctantly. "If our presence here is causing so much trouble." "Mum, we didn't do anything wrong," protested Tommy. "Why should we be the ones to leave?" "Because sometimes life isn't fair," replied Frank sadly, "and people like us have few options when facing powerful men." "But Dad," argued Billy, "the senator is powerful too, and he's on our side." "The senator is powerful, yes," Frank agreed, "but he's up against an alliance of several ranchers in the area, and we're just a poor family who might end up being sacrificed to settle the conflict." Mike, who had stayed quiet during the discussion, finally spoke. What if we tried to handle this another way? How so? Asked Margaret. What if we could get solid proof that the Colonel stole thunder, suggested Mike. Proof he couldn't deny? Mike, that would be too dangerous, said Frank, and we've already tried. The Colonel has fake documents, paid witnesses. But what if there was a way to prove the documents are fake? Mike insisted. Billy perked up at his brother's idea. Mike's right, he said. If we could prove the Colonel is lying, that would solve everything. And how do you plan to do that? Asked Margaret, worried about where the conversation was heading. I don't know yet, admitted Billy, but there has to be a way. Frank watched his sons, seeing the determination in their eyes. He knew that look well. He'd seen the same resolve in his wife when she decided to fight for something important. All right, he said finally. We'll give it a few more days. If we can't settle this by the end of the week, we'll accept the Colonel's offer. Billy felt a mix of relief and pressure. They had a few more days, but time was running out fast. The next morning, Billy woke up with an idea. If they were going to find proof against Colonel Parker, they needed to understand how the operation had been carried out. Tommy, Mike, he called his brothers after breakfast, let's talk to old Joe the gatekeeper again. What for? Asked Tommy. To get more details about the truck that came through the night thunder disappeared, explained Billy. The three brothers headed to the ranch gate, where old Joe was checking the papers of a delivery truck. Joe, Billy greeted politely, can we ask you a few more questions about that truck the other night? Of course, replied the old gatekeeper. What do you want to know? Do you remember exactly what time the truck came in and left? Asked Mike. Old Joe thought for a moment. Came in around 10 at night, he said, and left about 2 hours later, give or take. 2 hours? Repeated Tommy. Isn't that too long for a simple delivery? That's what I thought at the time, old Joe agreed, but I didn't want to stick my nose where it didn't belong. Did you notice anything else strange? Asked Billy. Well, now that you mention it, said the gatekeeper, scratching his head. I thought it was odd that Jack asked me not to log his entry in the register. The three brothers exchanged meaningful glances. He asked that? Asked Mike, trying to contain his excitement. Sure did, confirmed old Joe. Said it was an urgent, informal delivery and didn't need an official record. And you really didn't log it? Asked Tommy. Oh, I logged it, said old Joe with a sly smile. I may not have much formal education, but I'm no fool. I always record everything that comes in and out of this ranch. Billy felt his heart race. They had found concrete evidence. Old Joe, he said carefully, does that record still exist? Of course it does, replied the gatekeeper. It's in the logbook kept in the guardhouse. Could you show us? Asked Mike. Old Joe hesitated for a moment. I can, he finally decided. After all, you're trying to help recover the senator's horse. In the guardhouse, old Joe opened a large, well-kept book where he meticulously noted every vehicle entering and leaving the ranch. Here it is, he said, pointing to a specific line. White Ford truck, license plate PEB 3847, driver Jack Peterson, entry at 10:15 p.m., exit at 12:30 a.m. Billy read the entry several times, memorizing every detail. Old Joe, this proves the truck was here for over 2 hours, he said excitedly. Plenty of time to steal thunder. And it proves Jack lied when he said it was a quick delivery, added Tommy. Even more importantly, observed Mike, it proves Jack tried to hide his presence here. Old Joe closed the book and looked at the three boys. Are you going to show this to the senator? He asked. We will, confirmed Billy. Thank you, old Joe, you've helped us a lot. They ran toward the main house, eager to share their discovery with the senator, but when they reached the office, the secretary informed them he had left for an important meeting in town and wouldn't return until late afternoon. What kind of meeting? Asked Tommy, worried. A meeting with other ranchers in the area, the secretary replied gravely. It seems to be about recent troubles. The brothers exchanged glances, understanding the meeting was likely related to the pressures the senator had been facing. Can we wait for him to return? Asked Billy. You may, answered the secretary, but it could take a while. As they waited, the three brothers discussed their discovery and its implications. Now we have proof Jack was here the night of the theft, said Mike, but we still need to prove he took thunder. And we need to prove the documents the Colonel has are fake, added Tommy. How are we going to do that? Asked Billy, feeling there was still a long way to go. They were interrupted by the arrival of Charlie, who seemed agitated. Boys, said the foreman, have you seen the senator? He left for a meeting, Tommy informed him. Why? Did something happen? Charlie hesitated before answering. I got a troubling call, he finally said. Someone spreading rumors that the senator was negligent with the horse's security, which is why Thunder was stolen. But that's not true, protested Billy. The security here is excellent. I know it's not true, agreed Charlie, but people are believing it, and it could hurt the senator's reputation as a horse breeder. Billy felt frustration growing. With every discovery they made, it seemed new problems arose. Charlie, he finally said, we found important evidence against Colonel Parker. They told the foreman about old Joe's logbook, explaining how it proved Jack had lied about his visit to the ranch. That's excellent, said Charlie, perking up. Exactly the kind of evidence we needed. But it's still not enough, is it? Asked Mike. Not on its own, admitted Charlie, but it's a start. If we can get more evidence like this. How can we get more evidence? Asked Billy, determined to help. Charlie thought for a moment before answering. We need to understand better how the operation was carried out, he said. If we could figure out exactly how they took Thunder out of the stable without alerting the guards, or if we could prove that the Colonel's documents are fake, suggested Tommy. Or even better, said Billy, an idea forming in his mind, if we could make Thunder prove he's really himself. So how so? Asked Charlie, curious. Thunder knows me, Billy explained. He reacts to my presence in a unique way. If we could show that in front of impartial witnesses— Billy, that would be very dangerous, warned Charlie. It would mean going back to the Colonel's ranch again. Not necessarily, said Billy, his mind working quickly. What if we brought the Colonel and the horse here instead? How? Asked Tommy, intrigued. I don't know yet, admitted Billy, but there has to be a way. Senator Richard arrived in the late afternoon with a tired and worried expression. When the Smith brothers showed him old Joe's record, his eyes lit up for the first time. In days. This is excellent work, he praised. It's exactly the kind of evidence we needed to build a solid case. Senator, asked Billy, how was the meeting with the other ranchers? The senator sighed heavily before answering. Complicated, he admitted. They're demanding changes in how I run my business, threatening boycotts and other pressure. Tactics. And will you accept their demands? Asked Tommy, concerned. No, the senator replied firmly. I won't back down on my principles just to please people who resist progress. But does that mean the problems will continue? Asked Mike. It means we'll have to be even smarter to solve them, the senator answered. And the evidence you brought is an important step in that direction. The senator called his lawyers to review old Joe's record and discuss the legal implications. The lawyers confirmed it was valuable evidence, but agreed they still needed more to build a definitive case. Senator, Billy said during the meeting, I have an idea to get more evidence. I'm listening, replied the senator, always interested in the boys' contributions. What if we organized some kind of event where the Colonel brought the horse he claims to have bought, suggested Billy. In front of witnesses, I could prove it's Thunder. How? Asked one of the lawyers. Thunder knows me, Billy explained. He reacts to my presence in a unique way, responds to my specific commands. If it's really him, he'll show it in front of everyone. The senator considered the idea carefully. It's risky, he finally said. If the Colonel suspects it's a trap, he might refuse to participate. But if it works, Billy argued, we'd have definitive proof in front of impartial witnesses. What kind of event do you have in mind? Asked the senator, starting to warm up to the proposal. Billy thought quickly. A horse competition, he suggested. Something that seems natural, where local ranchers show off their best animals. A livestock fair, added Tommy, catching his brother's drift. Exactly, Billy agreed. The Colonel would be proud to show off the expensive horse he bought, and we'd have the chance to prove it's Thunder. The senator smiled for the first time in days. It's a brilliant idea, he admitted. Risky, but brilliant. The lawyers also grew excited about the proposal, seeing the legal possibilities it offered. If we get reliable witnesses at the event, said one of them, and if the boy really can prove the horse's identity, we'd have irrefutable evidence. When could we organize something like this? Asked the senator. The community's Midsummer Festival is in 2 weeks, Charlie reminded them, having arrived during the meeting. There's always an animal exhibition this time of year. Perfect, said the senator. I'll suggest expanding this year's exhibition, turning it into a regional competition. And will the colonel agree to participate? Asked Mike. If we present it the right way, he won't be able to refuse, replied the senator with a sly smile. His pride won't let him sit out a competition where he can show off his prized horse. The next few days were filled with intense preparation. The senator used his influence to quickly organize a regional horse competition as part of the midsummer celebration. He invited ranchers from across the area, offered attractive prizes, and ensured the presence of respected judges from other regions. As expected, Colonel Parker couldn't resist the opportunity to participate. He entered the competition with a recently acquired horse of exceptional lineage, exactly the description the senator had anticipated. He took the bait, Charlie remarked when they heard about the colonel's entry. Now we just have to hope. Everything goes well, replied Billy, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. During preparations, Billy trained intensively with the other horses on the ranch, refining the specific commands and signals he used with Thunder. He wanted to be absolutely sure he could demonstrate the unique bond he shared with the horse. Billy, said Dr. Robert, the veterinarian, are you certain you can tell Thunder apart from other similar horses? I'm absolutely sure, Billy replied with conviction. I know every move he makes, every little mannerism. And what if the colonel brings a different horse, the vet asked. What if he realized it was too risky to bring Thunder? Billy had considered that possibility, and it worried him. If he brings another horse, I'll know right away, he said, and that would also be evidence, because it would prove he lied about buying Thunder. The week before the competition was tense for the entire Smith family. Political pressure against, the senator continued, and rumors swirled that some ranchers were planning even more serious boycotts. What if this doesn't work? Margaret asked one night, voicing the fears they all felt. It will, Mom, Billy assured her. It has to. But what if it doesn't? She pressed. What if our attempt to help only makes things worse? Frank hugged, his wife sharing her worries. Margaret, we've come too far to give up now, he said. If we don't try, we'll regret it for the rest of our lives. The night before the competition, Billy barely slept. He stayed on the porch, staring at the stars and thinking of Thunder. Tomorrow, he'd finally know if his theory was right. If he could prove the horse at the colonel's ranch was truly his lost friend. Can't sleep, Tommy asked, joining his brother on the porch. I'm nervous, Billy admitted. What if I'm wrong? What if it's not really Thunder? You're not wrong, Tommy assured him. I saw how that horse reacted when you whistled. No strange horse would respond like that. But what if tomorrow is different? Billy insisted. What if he doesn't recognize me in front of all those people? Billy, Tommy said, placing a hand on his brother's shoulder. You saved Thunder's life. Horses don't forget that. He'll recognize you. The day of the competition dawned sunny and hot, perfect for an outdoor event. The whole community turned out for the midsummer celebration, which had become the biggest horse competition in the region in years. Billy woke early and went to check on the ranch's horses that would be competing. The senator had entered 3 animals, all exceptional, but Billy knew the real competition would be of a different kind. Ready for the big day? Charlie asked, walking up to the boy. I think so, answered Billy, trying to control his nerves. Remember, Billy, said Charlie seriously, you'll only get one chance. If Thunder is there, you need to be absolutely sure before doing anything. I'll be sure, promised Billy. The event was set up at the community fairgrounds, a wide open space surrounded by makeshift bleachers where hundreds of people had gathered to watch. There were ranchers from all over the region, livestock traders, veterinarians, local officials, and curious onlookers. Billy watched carefully as each horse arrived, searching for any sign of Thunder. There were magnificent animals of all kinds, but none that sparked recognition. The colonel hasn't arrived yet, observed Mike, who was also keeping an eye on the arrivals. He'll show up, said Tommy with conviction. His pride won't let him miss an opportunity like this. At 10 in the morning, just as the competition was about to begin, Colonel Parker's truck finally appeared. Billy's heart raced as he watched the vehicle approach the animal unloading area. "There he is," he whispered to his brothers. The colonel stepped out of the truck with confidence, greeting other ranchers as if nothing unusual were happening. Behind him, old Jack began preparing the ramp to unload the horse. Billy positioned himself where he could clearly see the animal when it was unloaded, but stayed far enough away to avoid drawing attention too soon. When the horse stepped off the truck, Billy felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. It was Thunder, without a doubt. Even from a distance, Billy immediately recognized the posture, the movements, the way the horse observed its surroundings. "It's him," he whispered to Tommy. "It's definitely Thunder." "Are you sure?" asked Tommy, wanting confirmation. "Absolutely sure," replied Billy, his voice trembling with emotion. The colonel led Thunder to the registration area, where a judge checked the paperwork and made the official entry. Billy watched from afar, noting how uncomfortable and confused Thunder seemed in the unfamiliar setting. "Now we need to wait for the right moment," said Mike. "We can't do anything suspicious." The competition began with several categories: best conformation, best training, best bloodline. The colonel had entered Thunder in the best conformation category, where horses were judged purely on appearance and physical structure. Billy watched several presentations, but his mind was fixed only on Thunder. The horse would be presented in the mid-afternoon, giving him time to plan his approach. "Billy," called the senator, approaching discreetly, "do you confirm it's Thunder?" "I do, sir," Billy answered without hesitation. "It's definitely him." "Good," said the senator. "The judges have already been informed. There may be a special situation during the presentation. They're prepared to allow an unconventional demonstration." "What kind of demonstration?" asked Billy. "You'll be able to approach the horse and try to prove its identity," the senator explained, "but you'll have to be convincing. If you can't prove it definitively, we'll look ridiculous." Billy nodded, understanding the pressure on his shoulders. When it was Colonel Parker's turn to present his horse, a crowd gathered around the main arena. The colonel, dressed in his finest rancher's attire, led Thunder with the air of a proud owner. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the presenter, "here we have an exceptional specimen, presented by Colonel William Parker, a purebred animal recently acquired from specialized breeders." Billy watched as Thunder was led around the arena. The horse was clearly uncomfortable, not responding to the colonel's commands with the same ease it had shown with people it knew. "Now is the time," whispered the senator to Billy. "Are you ready?" Billy took a deep breath, gathering all the courage he had. "I'm ready," he confirmed. As previously arranged, one of the judges approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we have a special situation today. There are claims that this horse may have an identity different from what's documented. To clarify the situation, we'll allow a special demonstration." A murmur spread through the crowd. Colonel Parker seemed surprised and indignant. "What kind of demonstration?" he protested. "My horse has all the proper paperwork." "It's just a verification procedure," the judge explained diplomatically. "If there's nothing to hide, there should be no problem." Billy walked toward the arena, feeling the eyes of hundreds of people on him. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. When he got close to Thunder, he stopped, a few feet away. The horse, which had been restless and uneasy, suddenly lifted its head and looked straight at Billy. For a moment that felt like an eternity. Boy and horse stared at each other. Then slowly, Billy put his fingers to his lips and produced the same melodic whistle he'd used at the colonel's ranch. Thunder's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. The horse neighed loudly, pulled the reins from the colonel's hands, and walked straight to Billy, stretching its neck and resting its head against the boy's chest. A stunned silence fell over the arena. It was impossible to deny the obvious connection between the boy and the horse. "Thunder," Billy whispered, stroking the animal's neck. "I knew you'd recognize me." The horse responded with another soft neigh, clearly relaxing for the first time since it had been presented. "This proves nothing," shouted Colonel Parker, his voice filled with desperation. "Any well-trained horse can be taught to react like that." But Billy wasn't finished with his demonstration. He whispered specific commands into Thunder's ear, commands he'd developed exclusively for this horse during their months at The senator's ranch. Thunder responded perfectly, performing a sequence of movements that were clearly familiar to him. He walked in a circle, stopped exactly where Billy indicated, and even bowed slightly when the boy gestured in a certain way. The crowd erupted in applause. That level of specific training and personal connection couldn't be faked. "Ladies and gentlemen," the head judge announced, "it seems we have a situation here that needs further investigation." "This is ridiculous," protested the colonel, but his voice sounded less and less convincing. "My horse has legal documentation." "Documentation that can be verified," said an authoritative voice. Everyone turned to see Senator Richard approaching, accompanied by two people Billy didn't recognize. "I'd like to introduce Dr. Ferdinand White, a licensed official veterinarian," the senator said, "and Mr. Anthony Perry, a licensed private investigator. They have important information about this case." Dr. Ferdinand approached Thunder with specialized equipment. "With the judge's permission," he said, "I'd like to check this animal's microchip identification." "Microchip identification?" asked one of the judges. "All purebred horses have identification microchips implanted," the veterinarian explained. "They're impossible to fake or alter." Colonel Parker visibly paled. "This is unnecessary," he protested. "I've already provided all the required paperwork." "If the paperwork is legitimate," the senator said calmly, "the microchip will confirm it. There's no problem." Dr. Ferdinand passed an electronic scanner over Thunder's neck. The device beeped and displayed a sequence of numbers on the screen. "The chip identifies this animal as Thunder of Thompson, registration number 78542, property of Richard Thompson," announced the veterinarian loudly. A murmur of indignation spread through the crowd. The evidence was irrefutable. "This is a setup," shouted the colonel, but his voice sounded desperate. "Someone tampered with the chip." "Colonel Parker," said the private investigator, stepping forward, "microchips can't be altered without leaving physical evidence. And besides, I have documents here proving the sale you claim to have made never happened." The investigator opened a folder and began reading. "The livestock dealer who supposedly sold you this horse confirms no such transaction took place. In fact, he doesn't even deal in purebred horses, only common cattle." Colonel Parker looked around, seeing the judgment in the faces of the crowd. His strategy had completely fallen apart. "Furthermore," the investigator continued, "we have evidence that one of your employees, Jack Peterson, was at Senator Richard's ranch the night Thunder disappeared, staying long enough to carry out the theft." The colonel made one last desperate attempt. "Even if this horse really is Thunder," he said, "there's no proof I knew it. I could have been tricked by the seller." "Colonel Parker," said the senator, his voice ice-cold, "do you really want to keep lying in front of all these people?" There was a long silence. Colonel Parker looked at Thunder, who stood calmly beside Billy, then at the crowd of ranchers and officials watching him with stern expressions. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "All right," he said quietly. "Jack brought the horse to my ranch, said he found him loose on the road. I suspected it might be the senator's horse, but you decided to keep him anyway," the senator finished. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," the colonel protested weakly. "I just thought you could take advantage of the situation," said a voice from the crowd. "You thought your position would protect you from consequences," said another. Colonel Parker realized he had lost not just the horse, but the community's respect. His reputation was ruined. "What happens now?" asked one of the judges. "Now," said the senator, "Thunder goes home, where he always should have been." Billy stroked Thunder's neck, overjoyed to have his friend back. But at the same time, he pitied Colonel Parker, who had let greed lead him astray and now faced the consequences. "Colonel," Billy said, surprising everyone, "you didn't have to do this. If you wanted a fine horse, you could have asked the senator for help." The colonel looked at the boy, seeing the sincerity in his young eyes. "You're right, son," he said, his voice choked. "I made a terrible mistake, driven by envy and pride." The senator stepped closer to the colonel. "William," he said, using his first name for the first time, "it doesn't have to be like this between us. Competition can be healthy. It doesn't have to be destructive." "After all I've done?" the colonel asked, disbelieving. Everyone makes mistakes, the senator replied. What matters is learning from them and moving forward. The crowd watched the exchange with interest. Many had expected the senator to be harsher, but his generosity impressed them. Senator, one of the ranchers asked, will you press charges against the colonel? I won't be pressing charges, the senator answered. Thunder is back, no one was hurt, and I believe we've all learned important lessons today. Billy watched the interaction between the two powerful men, admiring the senator's ability to turn a conflict into an opportunity for reconciliation. The rest of the competition went smoothly without further incidents. Ironically, Thunder ended up winning the Best Confirmation category, much to Billy's delight and the senator's satisfaction. I think after all he's been through, he deserved to win, Charlie remarked when they heard the results. When they returned to the ranch at the end of the day, Billy personally led Thunder back to his stall. The horse seemed happy to be home, immediately recognizing the familiar surroundings. Welcome back, boy, Billy whispered, offering Thunder his favorite feed. The horse ate calmly, occasionally lifting his head to look at Billy as if making sure it wasn't a dream. Billy, called the senator, approaching the stall, I'd like to talk with you. Yes, sir, Billy replied, joining him. What you did today was extraordinary, the senator said. Not only did you recover Thunder, but you also resolved a conflict that could have turned very destructive. I just wanted my friend back, Billy said simply. I know, the senator replied with a smile. And it's that very purity of motive that makes your actions so special. They walked in silence for a few moments. Senator, Billy finally asked, will the trouble with the other ranchers end now? I believe so, the senator answered. What happened today showed everyone that my methods are not only ethical but effective. You and your family are living proof that treating people with dignity yields better results than exploitation. And can my family stay? Billy asked, still fearing they might have to leave. Billy, your family isn't just allowed to stay. I hope you'll stay forever, the senator said sincerely. You've become an essential part of this ranch and this community. That evening, the Smith family gathered for dinner in their ranch, home, feeling completely secure about their future for the first time in weeks. I can't believe it's over, Margaret said as she served dinner, her hands finally steady instead of trembling with nerves. Billy was very brave today, Tommy said, proud of his younger brother. You were all brave, Frank corrected. Each of you helped resolve this situation. And now? Mike asked. What happens next? Now we go back to our normal lives, Billy replied. I take care of Thunder, you all keep studying and working and we'll be happy. Normal life? Tommy laughed. Billy, after everything that's happened, I don't think our lives will ever be normal again. Maybe not by the old standards, Margaret agreed, but it's our life, and it's good. In the following weeks, life at the senator's ranch gradually returned to the peaceful rhythm it had before Thunder's disappearance. Political tensions eased significantly after the competition, and several ranchers in the area began reconsidering their own treatment of workers. Colonel Parker, humiliated by the public events, initially kept to himself at his estate. But the senator, true to his word about reconciliation, made a point of visiting him personally a few weeks later. William, the senator said during the visit, it doesn't have to be this way between us. How can I look you in the eye after what I did? The colonel asked, genuinely remorseful. The same way I'm looking into yours now, the senator replied. Seeing a man who made a mistake, but can still do what's right. The conversation led to an unexpected partnership. Colonel Parker, influenced by the senator's example, began implementing better working conditions for his own employees. It didn't reach the level of the senator's ranch, but it was significant progress by their standards. Billy, in turn, had become a minor local celebrity. The story of the boy who found a lost horse and then proved its identity in a public competition had spread throughout the region. Billy, said Professor Marina during a lesson, have you ever thought about writing your story? Writing? Asked Billy, surprised by the suggestion. Yes, insisted the professor. It's an inspiring story that could motivate others. But Professor, I just did what anyone would do, protested Billy. No, Billy, she said firmly. Not everyone would have the courage to help a lost animal without thinking of the consequences. And not everyone would have the determination to fight for the truth when things got tough. The professor's idea planted a seed in Billy's mind. Maybe there really was value in telling his story, not out of pride, but to show that ordinary people can make a difference when they act with compassion and courage. A few months later, Billy began working on a school project about his experience. It wasn't quite a book, but a detailed presentation he would share with other schools in the area. The most important part of the story, Billy wrote in his conclusion, isn't that I found a valuable horse. It's that I learned doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Billy's project was so well received that the senator decided to fund its publication as a small book. The profits would go to a fund to help other needy families in the region. "Senator," Billy said when he heard the plan, "this won't make much money. It's just a simple story." "Billy," the senator replied, "the best stories are always the simple ones. They're the ones that touch people's hearts and inspire them to be better." A year after the competition events, the senator's ranch had become a model for the region. Other landowners came to visit, eager to learn about fair labor practices and sustainable management. The Smith family had settled completely into their new life. Tommy developed an interest in modern farming and planned to study agriculture. Mike discovered a talent for business administration and intended to pursue a degree in business management. Billy remained passionate about horses and veterinary work. "Mom," Billy said one afternoon while helping Margaret in the garden, "do you regret that we came here?" "Regret it?" she asked, surprised. "Billy, this was the best thing that ever happened to our family." "Even with all the problems we faced?" Billy pressed. "Especially because of the problems," Margaret replied wisely. "They made us grow, made us realize what we're capable of when we fight together." "And Dad? Is he happy?" Billy asked. "Do you see your father smiling every morning when he goes to work?" Margaret answered. "He's never had a job that respected his dignity so much." Billy nodded, watching Frank approach the house after another day of work. There really was something different in his father's posture, a confidence and satisfaction that hadn't been there before. "How was your day, Dad?" Billy asked. "Great, son," Frank replied, hugging his family. "The senator approved my proposal to improve the irrigation system. We'll save water and increase productivity at the same time." "Your proposal?" Tommy asked proudly. "My proposal," Frank confirmed with pride. The senator values ideas from any employee, no matter their position. This appreciation for ideas from all levels had become a hallmark of the senator's ranch. Employees felt motivated to contribute suggestions, creating an environment of constant innovation. Thunder, naturally, had become the center of attention whenever there were visitors at the ranch. His story was told over and over, and his special connection with Billy never failed to impress. "It's like they understand each other without words," remarked one visitor, watching Billy care for Thunder. "I think that's exactly it," replied Dr. Robert. "There's a communication between them that goes beyond words." Billy had developed his skills with horses to the point of impressing even experienced veterinarians. His natural intuition, combined with the formal training he received, made him exceptionally competent. "Billy," Dr. Robert said one day, "have you ever thought about specializing in animal behavior?" "What do you mean?" asked Billy, curious. "It's a field of veterinary medicine that studies how animals think and feel," the vet explained. "You have a natural talent for it." "That's really a thing?" Billy asked, excited. "It sure is, and it's a growing field," confirmed Dr. Robert. "With your talent, you could become a recognized expert." The idea fascinated Billy. The possibility of turning his passion for horses into a specialized career was everything he could wish for. 2 years after his first encounter with Thunder in the desert, Billy was about to turn 15. He had grown both physically and emotionally, but he kept the same compassion and determination that had led him to help a lost horse. "Billy," the senator called one spring morning, "I want to talk to you about your future." "My future?" Billy asked, intrigued. "Yes," said the senator. "You're turning 15. It's time we seriously think about your higher education." "Senator, I still have to finish high school," Billy pointed out. "Yes, but I want to make sure you have the best opportunities when the time comes," the senator explained. "I'm willing to fund your college education, wherever you want to study." Billy's heart raced. The offer was more generous than his wildest expectations. Sir, that's incredibly kind, but— No buts, the senator interrupted. You saved much more than a horse when you found Thunder. You saved a part of my soul I thought I'd lost forever. How so? Billy asked, not fully understanding. The senator leaned back in his chair, a nostalgic look crossing his face. Thunder was the last gift my wife gave me before she passed, he explained. When he disappeared, I felt like I was losing the last physical connection to her. I didn't. No, Billy said softly. You didn't just bring Thunder back, the senator continued. You taught me that true connections don't depend on objects or animals. They depend on the love and memories we carry in our hearts. Billy didn't know what to say to such a personal revelation. Besides, the senator added, you and your family have transformed this ranch. You've brought a new energy, a different perspective that's enriched all of us. Senator, Billy finally said, I accept your offer, but on one condition. What condition? Asked the senator, surprised. I want to study nearby so I can keep taking care of Thunder, Billy said. And I want to use what I learned to help others like my family. The senator smiled, unsurprised by the young man's selfless response. Billy, I wouldn't expect anything less from you, he said. And I promise we'll find a way for you to study without being away from Thunder. As the conversation continued, they outlined plans for Billy's future. He would study veterinary medicine with a focus on animal behavior, always keeping his base at the senator's ranch. And when you graduate, the senator said, I'd like you to consider becoming my partner in a special project. What project? Billy asked, curious. A training center for young people interested in working with animals, explained the senator. A place where folks like you can develop their natural talents. That would be amazing, said Billy, his eyes shining with excitement. Then it's settled, confirmed the senator. We have a plan for your future. That afternoon, Billy shared the news with his family. Their reaction was a mix of joy and pride. My boy is going to be a vet, said Margaret, hugging Billy with tears in her eyes. And he'll have his own clinic, added Frank, just as emotional. Not a clinic, corrected Billy, a training center. I want to teach others how to care for animals the way I learned here. Tommy and Mike congratulated their younger brother, knowing he deserved every opportunity coming his way. Billy, said Tommy, remember when we were kids and you always brought hurt animals home? I do, Billy replied, smiling. I always thought it was a waste of time, admitted Tommy. Now I see it was your calling from the start. The following years passed quickly. Billy threw himself into his studies, balancing formal education with hands-on experience at the ranch. His reputation as someone with a special gift for handling horses spread throughout the region. When he turned 18, Billy got an unexpected surprise. The senator threw a party in his honor, inviting ranchers and officials from all around. This celebration, announced the senator during the event, isn't just for Billy's birthday. It's to honor the change he's brought to our community. How so? Someone in the crowd asked. Billy has taught us that true wealth isn't in material possessions, explained the senator, but in relationships built on mutual respect and compassion. Colonel Parker, who had become an unlikely ally over the years, stood up to speak. I want to publicly apologize, he said, for doubting this family's character. Billy and the Smiths have taught me about humility and forgiveness. Colonel, so that's not necessary, said Billy, still uneasy with the attention. Oh, it is, insisted the colonel, because admitting mistakes and learning from them is part of growing. The party continued with stories and memories from the past years. Several ranchers shared how they'd improved their workers' treatment after seeing the results at the senator's ranch. It's a positive domino effect, remarked one. Change on one property inspired change in others. By the time Billy started college at 19, he already had hands-on experience equal to professionals with years in the field. His professors were impressed by his intuitive understanding of animal behavior. Mr. Smith, said the program coordinator, we rarely see students with your mix of practical knowledge and natural sensitivity. I learned from the best, Billy replied modestly. And now you'll teach others, observed the professor. The cycle continues. During his college years, Billy kept his base at the senator's ranch, returning every weekend to care for Thunder and the other horses. This routine let him immediately apply the theories he learned in class. Thunder, now older, had become a wise and experienced horse. His bond with Billy had only deepened over time, creating a partnership that even specialized vets found remarkable. "It's like they read each other's minds," remarked a visiting professor from the university. "It's not telepathy," Billy explained with a smile, "just mutual understanding built over years together." In his final year of university, Billy began working on his thesis about nonverbal communication between humans and horses. His study, largely based on his experience with Thunder, caught the attention of researchers from other universities. "Billy," his advisor said, "your thesis has the potential to be published in specialized journals." "Is that important?" asked Billy, still not entirely familiar with the academic world. "Very important," confirmed the advisor. "It can establish your reputation as a researcher right from the start of your career." When he graduated at 23, Billy was considered one of the most promising young veterinarians in the region. Several clinics offered him jobs, but he had already made up his mind. "Senator," Billy said on his graduation day, "I'm ready to start our project." "The training center?" asked the senator, excited. "The training center," Billy confirmed. "I want to begin by teaching others how to develop the same connection with animals that I did with Thunder." The Thunder Training Center opened 2 years, later on a specially prepared area of the senator's ranch. It was a modern complex with stables, classrooms, labs, and hands-on training areas. The first group of students included young people from rural families in the area, many in situations similar to what the Smith family had faced years earlier. "Welcome," Billy said on the first day of class, "to the place where you'll learn that working with animals is much more than a job. It's a calling." Among the students was Mary, a 15-year-old girl whose family had lost their small farm due to drought. She reminded Billy of himself years ago, full of potential but lacking opportunities. "Professor Billy," Mary asked during one of the first lessons, "is it true you found Thunder lost in the desert?" "It's true," Billy confirmed. "But the most important part of the story isn't that I found a valuable horse. It's that I learned the importance of helping those in need, even when we don't know what benefits it might bring." "And if you hadn't stopped to help," asked another student, "then none of this would exist," Billy replied, gesturing around the center. "Not this place, not these opportunities, not these friendships." Billy's lessons combined veterinary theory with life philosophy. He taught not just animal care techniques, but also compassion, responsibility, and the importance of looking beyond appearances. "Animals," he explained in one of his favorite lessons, "are masters of honest communication. They don't fake emotions, lie, or manipulate. If we learn to truly listen to them, they teach us how to be better people." The center's success was immediate. Graduates found jobs at ranches, veterinary clinics, and research centers across the region. More importantly, they carried with them the values of compassion and integrity that Billy emphasized. "Billy," the senator said during a visit, "you've exceeded my most optimistic expectations." "How so?" Billy asked. "I thought we were creating a training center," the senator explained. "But you've created so much more. You've created a school of life." 5 years after the center's opening, Billy married Anne, a veterinarian he'd met in university who shared his passion for working with horses. The ceremony was held at the ranch with Thunder, now an elderly but still dignified horse, serving as a kind of honorary best man. "Thunder," Billy whispered into the horse's ear after the ceremony, "thank you for changing my life." The horse responded with a soft, affectionate whinny, as if he understood perfectly. Anne fit seamlessly into the center's team, bringing expertise in preventive veterinary medicine that complemented Billy's focus on animal behavior. "You make a perfect team," observed Charlie, who had remained as the ranch foreman all these years. "Just like me and Thunder," replied Billy with a smile. "Just like your family and this ranch," added Anne. Billy and Anne's first child was born 3 years later, a boy they named Gabriel. From an early age, Gabriel showed the same natural affinity with animals that had defined his father. "Is it hereditary?" Anne joked, watching baby Gabriel calmly interact with a foal. "I think it's love," Billy answered. "And love always finds a way to endure." Thunder, despite his advanced age, still had enough energy to oversee activities at the center. He became a sort of mascot and assistant teacher, showing endless patience with beginner students. "He knows he's teaching," remarked Mary, who had become one of the center's instructors after graduating. "He always knew," Billy replied. "From the very first day we met, he was teaching me." When Thunder turned 25, an advanced age for horses, the center organized a special celebration. Former students traveled from afar to attend, witnessing an entire community's gratitude toward the horse who had inspired so much change. "Thunder," Billy said during the celebration, "you're not just a special horse. You're a symbol of hope and possibility." The horse, as if understanding the tribute, stood tall and dignified throughout the ceremony, accepting affection from hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by his story. 2 years later, on a quiet autumn morning, Thunder passed peacefully in his sleep. Billy found him in the stable, looking serene and comfortable, as if he had chosen the perfect moment for his farewell. "Thank you, my friend," Billy whispered, stroking the neck of the horse who had changed so much for the last time. "For everything you taught me, for everything we built together." Thunder's funeral gathered the largest gathering the region had ever seen. Ranchers, veterinarians, former students, local officials, and entire families came to pay their final respects. "Thunder lived an extraordinary life," the senator said during the ceremony, "not just because of his exceptional lineage, but because of the impact he had on all of us. He taught us," Billy added, "that true connections transcend species, that compassion can change destinies, and that a single act of kindness can create waves of transformation that last for generations." Thunder was buried in a special place on the ranch, beneath a tree he had often sought for shade on hot afternoons. A simple plaque marked the spot: "Thunder of Thompson, teacher, friend, inspiration." Despite the sadness of Thunder's passing, the center continued to thrive. His memory became part of the curriculum, with students learning not just about veterinary techniques, but also the story of the horse who had inspired it all. "Professor Billy," a new student asked months later, "is it true you still feel Thunder's presence?" Billy smiled, looking out the classroom window toward the grave beneath the tree. "Every day," he answered honestly. "Not in a supernatural way, but in every lesson I learned from him, in every student who forms a special bond with an animal, in every life changed by compassion." "Is he still teaching?" another student asked. "He always was," Billy replied, "and he always will be." Years passed and the Thunder Training Center became a regional benchmark for specialized veterinary education. Billy had trained hundreds of young people, many of whom opened their own clinics or training centers in other towns. When he turned 40, Billy was honored by the local community with an award for his contributions to rural development. During the ceremony, he reflected on the journey that had begun with an 11-year-old boy offering water to a lost horse. "When I found Thunder that day in the desert," he said in his thank you speech, "I thought I was saving an animal's life. I didn't know I was saving my own life and my family's too. I learned that small acts of kindness can have enormous consequences," he continued, "that helping others, even when we don't know what we'll get in return, is always worth it. And I learned that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in relationships, in purpose, in opportunities to make a difference in others' lives." The audience, made up of people whose lives had been touched by Billy's work, responded with enthusiastic applause. Gabriel, now 17, watched his father with pride. He had grown up at the center, learning not just about horses, but about the values that guided the family's work. "Dad," Gabriel said after the ceremony, "I want to follow in your footsteps." "Are you sure?" Billy asked. "It's a life of hard work and constant dedication." "I'm sure," Gabriel confirmed. "I want to help continue the work you started with you and Thunder." Billy hugged his son, feeling like the circle was coming full. "Then let's begin your serious training," he said. "There's a lot to learn." On the 50th anniversary of the center, Billy and Anne decided to establish a permanent educational fund to ensure that young people from struggling families would always have access to training, no matter their financial situation. "It's our way of making sure the mission continues," Anne explained during the announcement. "And our way of honoring Thunder's memory," Billy added. The fund was named the Thunder Fund for Rural Education, and it quickly drew donations from former students, local ranchers, and organizations interested in rural development. Frank and Margaret, now elderly but still active, watched their son's success with admiration and gratitude. "Who would have thought," Margaret remarked one afternoon, watching Gabriel work with a young horse, "that our boy would become such an important man?" "He was always important," Frank corrected. "He just needed the chance to show it." "And it all started with a lost horse," Margaret mused. "No," Frank said wisely. "It all started with a kind boy who couldn't ignore a creature in need." Tommy and Mike, who had built their own successful careers in the region, often visited the center to see how their younger brother had turned a chance discovery into a lasting legacy. "Billy," Tommy said during one of these visits, "do you remember when we were kids and dreamed of a better life?" "I remember," Billy replied. "You surpassed all our dreams," Mike said. "Not only did you get a better life, but you created better lives for hundreds of others." "We all surpassed our dreams," Billy corrected. "The whole family grew and thrived." "But you were the catalyst," Tommy insisted. "Your courage that day in the desert changed all our fates." As Billy grew older, he began systematically documenting his experiences and methods. He wanted to ensure the knowledge gathered over decades wouldn't be lost. "Anne," he said one day, "I want to write a book about everything we've learned here." "A technical book?" she asked. "Not just technical," Billy explained. "I want to tell the whole story from meeting Thunder to today, the technical lessons and the life lessons." "That'll be a big project," Anne observed. "The best projects always are," Billy replied with a smile. The book, Thunder, A Story of Compassion and Transformation, was published 3 years later, becoming required reading in veterinary and rural development courses at several universities. More important than academic success, the book inspired young people across the country to consider careers in animal care and rural development. "Professor Billy," wrote a reader in a letter, "your book made me realize I want to work with animals. Where can I learn?" Dozens of similar letters arrived monthly, testifying to the lasting impact of Billy and Thunder's story. When Billy turned 60, the center had already trained over 1,000 students who worked across the country and even abroad. The economic and social impact of the project was measurable in terms of jobs created, increased agricultural productivity, and improved quality of life. "Billy," said the senator, now 85 but still sharp, "you've achieved something few do in life." "What's that?" asked Billy. "You turned a personal calling into a collective benefit," explained the senator. "You created something that will last long beyond your own life." "We were lucky," Billy said modestly. "It wasn't luck," insisted the senator. "It was vision, dedication, and above all a heart that never lost its capacity to care for others." Gabriel, now a veterinary graduate and working as the center's associate director, represented the natural continuation of the project. "Dad," Gabriel said during a conversation about the future, "I want to expand the center to include other species besides horses." "What species?" asked Billy, intrigued. "Cattle, sheep, even wildlife," Gabriel explained. "I want the center to become a reference for interspecies communication in general." Billy smiled, seeing in his son the same passion and vision that had driven his own journey. "That's an excellent idea," he said. "When do you want to start?" The center's expansion was a success, attracting researchers and students interested in animal behavior across multiple species. Billy's pioneering work with horses served as the foundation for developing similar methods for other animals. "Hey, it's amazing," remarked a visiting researcher, "how the basic principles of communication and compassion apply to all species." "That's what Thunder taught me from the beginning," Billy replied, "that the language of the heart is universal." At 65, Billy began gradually stepping back from his direct activities at the center, passing more responsibilities to Gabriel and other experienced instructors. "It's not retirement," he explained to the family. "It's a transition. I want time to write more, to reflect on everything we've experienced." His second book, Life Lessons from a Horse Teacher, was published 2 years later, focusing on the philosophical and human aspects of working with animals. This book, Billy wrote in the preface, is for everyone who believes animals are our teachers, not our subordinates. The book became popular beyond academic circles, read by those interested in personal growth and spirituality. On a beautiful spring day when Billy turned 70, the entire community gathered for a special celebration at the center. Former students traveled from afar, officials paid tribute, and a new wing of the center was unveiled in his honor. Today, we're not just celebrating Billy's 70 years, Gabriel said during the ceremony. We're celebrating 5 decades of transformation begun by a boy who cared for a lost horse. We're celebrating proof that a life dedicated to serving others is the richest life possible, added Anne. During the celebration, a new statue was revealed, Thunder and young Billy, recreating the moment of their first meeting in the desert. The plaque at its base read, "Where compassion meets opportunity, miracles happen." "It's perfect," Billy said, gazing at the statue with tears in his eyes. "Like the two of you," replied the senator, who at 90 years old still insisted on attending important events. That night, Billy walked alone to Thunder's grave beneath the tree. It was something he did regularly, especially on significant dates. "My old friend," he said, sitting near the grave, "look where your trust led me. Look how many lives we touched together." The gentle wind rustled the tree leaves, creating a sound Billy always interpreted as Thunder's reply. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." When Billy turned 80, the center had become a nationally recognized institution. Delegations from other countries came to study the methods developed there, and universities offered research partnerships. Gabriel, now 57 and the center's full director, had expanded its activities to include animal-assisted therapy programs for children with special needs. "Dad," Gabriel said during the birthday celebration, "your work has inspired generations. There are people all over the country whose lives changed because of what started here." "It wasn't just my work," Billy corrected. "It was all of ours, including Thunder's." "Especially Thunder," Gabriel agreed. Frank and Margaret had passed a few years earlier, peacefully in their beds, surrounded by family. Until the end, they expressed gratitude for the life they'd built after Billy found Thunder. "They lived full lives," Billy said at their funeral, "lives that surpassed every expectation they had as young people." Tommy and Mike, now retired but still active in the community, often visited Billy to reminisce about the old days. "Billy," Tommy said during one visit, "do you remember when we were kids and Mum said you had a heart too big for your chest?" "I remember," Billy replied. "She was right," Mike added. "Your heart was big enough to transform an entire community." By 85, Billy's health began to decline. He spent most of his time at home, but still received visitors regularly, and continued writing his memoirs. "Gabriel," he said one day, "I want to make sure Thunder's story is never forgotten." "It never will be, Dad," Gabriel assured him. "It's part of the center's foundation, part of the community's culture." "And the values?" Billy asked. "Compassion, integrity, serving others?" "Those are eternal," Gabriel answered. "They're woven into everything we do here." On the eve of his 90th birthday, Billy asked to be taken to Thunder's grave one last time. Gabriel accompanied him, pushing the wheelchair along the familiar path. "Thunder," Billy said, touching the headstone with a trembling hand. "Tomorrow. I turn 90. 90 years filled with the richest experiences a man could have." He paused. "Thank you for trusting an 11-year-old boy that day in the desert. Thank you for teaching me that serving others is the secret to happiness." His voice softened. "Until we meet again, my friend." Billy passed peacefully in his sleep on the morning of his 90th birthday. Gabriel found him with a serene expression, as if he had left in peace with himself and all he had accomplished. Billy's funeral drew thousands, former students, colleagues, officials, and countless others whose lives had been touched by his work. Billy Johnson Smith, the main speaker said, proved that an ordinary life can have extraordinary impact when guided by compassion and dedication. He taught us, Gabriel added, that finding our calling is just the beginning. What we do with it defines our legacy. Billy was buried near Thunder, under the same tree that had become a pilgrimage site for people interested in the story of transformation that began with a boy and a horse. His tombstone was simple: Billy Johnson Smith, teacher, visionary, friend to animals. Where there is compassion, there is hope. Years later, when Gabriel was a grey-haired man running a center that had become a global reference, he still took visitors to see the graves beneath the tree. This, he would tell them, is where it all began, with a simple act of kindness between a boy and a horse. History teaches us, he continued, that each of us has the power to spark changes that will last generations. We just need the courage to act with compassion when the opportunity arises. And so the story of Billy and Thunder continued to inspire new generations, proving that some connections transcend physical life and become part of a community's soul. The Thunder Training Center remained a living testament that when compassion meets opportunity, there is no limit to the good that can be done, and that sometimes saving a lost animal in the desert can be the first step on a journey that transforms the world around us. End of story. Now that you've heard this touching story of Billy and Thunder, tell us in the comments, what moved your heart the most? Share if you know similar stories of compassion transforming lives. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales.